Welcome on everyone to our day one of the Champions Cube weekend here. It's a weekend jam-packed full of Cube content. We're in the thick of it. It's myself, Joe Bernard, and Sleight here, who's actually a day two competitor and a two-time champion of the Champions Cube joining me. And we're going to be following along with Zak's side of the draft here. We're drafting Grover's Mutant Rulebox Cube. So there's a lot for us to sink our teeth into here, but Zak's already made a couple of interesting picks here, Sleight.
Absolutely, yeah. So pack one, Zach kind of staked a claim immediately with a Reggie Drago V Star. It is
Mhm.
errated so that it doesn't have its V Star power, but it is an incredibly powerful card given all of the Dragon Pokemon that are in the draft. So that really shows that Zach wants to just get into an archetype and try and kind of stay there and develop out in that archetype as early as possible to ensure that he has the highest quality deck possible. The second pick here, not so controversial. I think Colress is a pretty strong
Yeah.
pickup on the consistency side for sure.
Yeah, so just going over the cube itself, it's a mutant draft, so we are evolving these Pokemon through their type rather than through regular evolution rules. And as you can see, there's a ton of rulebox Pokemon. These would typically be 2 and 3 prizes, but we actually have to reassess our minds here and get into the swing of things of thinking these are actually very bulky single prize Pokemon. That's the rules imposed within Grover's Cube, with the exception of V Star Pokemon, V Max Pokemon, and as well as V Star Pokemon and the Scarlet and Violet EX era, the most recent EXs. Those are still 2 prizes, but everything else are single prize Pokemon. So we're actually looking at a very slow. Oh, and tag team Pokemon, yeah, which are also only stage ones. And some of these Pokemon can't evolve as well. So there's actually a lot of rules to bear in mind for this cube. But it means that it's going to be a completely different experience to what you'd expect from some of these Pokemon that you may have seen in standard over the last few years, but really it's a completely different pace. And I think more akin to like the EX era, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. The pace of the EX era and really even a little slower than that, just because this cube has been curated to kind of shave off the very top end of some of the attacking options and some of the things that really make games as fast as they were in multiple eras of the game when these cards were legal. And so what you end up with is this really like mid-ish power feeling tempo where each knockout takes a lot of resources. It can take several turns. Different attacks that actually using an attack to accelerate a couple of energy can be very valuable, whereas in the environments where these cards were legal and played, oftentimes that was not actually the case.
Pretty interesting decision here for Zach as well. Squawkabilly EX, one of the few colorless Pokemon that has not only a great acceleration attack, but also provides obviously fantastic draw power from that Squawk and Seize. And I think draw power is actually going to be a topic we touch on a number of times throughout this draft because there are so few drawing options in terms of the Pokemon side of things here. Really looking at the likes of Zoroark GX, there's a number of those, Silvally GX, there's even some Naganadel GX, which can convert some dragon types into card draw, but really there aren't many Pokemon just that sort of sit and accrue value via their abilities. So picking up this early Squawk ability seems like a really nice option, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, they are few and far between, and they are very valuable in
Mm-hmm.
ensure kind of giving yourself some insulation against dead draws and also late game disruption, which can be very powerful in a cube like this. Zach did have a couple of really strong cards in that last pack, stuff like Pow Hand Extension, Rescue
Yeah.
Stretcher, options that are really, really strong in this kind of a draft and in general. But interesting that Zach decides that the squawkability consistency is the way that he wants to go. I think that is totally reasonable. Definitely don't disagree with the pick at all. Here, he's got another couple of interesting options, but he immediately just snaps that Giratina. What do you think about that pick, Joe?
Maybe he's just trying to lay his stake in the ground that he wants to say that he's in fighting, into Dragon early, because I think that's kind of the best of Regidrago. If you get into Dragon early and just sort of wave the flag for other people around the table that you're committing to it, it can help you in your cause because Drago just gets stronger and stronger the more Dragon options you have. We know Chaos Wheel can be made even more efficient via an Apex Dragon option, but there are some strong cards in that pack. There's Eldegoss V that stands out to me massively. There's a couple of other decent supporter cards, like Cynthia's Feelings isn't that bad in this sort of format. Even Ninetales GX can be a really annoying Pokemon with the so few limited gust options. It means spread is just even more appealing, and having that Ice Blade plus the fear of Ice Path GX is difficult to play around for some people. So this is like a very inflexible pick, but also it might be just towards the cause of making your Regidrago pick earlier stand out that little bit more.
Absolutely, yeah. Zach Regidrago is the build around card for the dragon
Yeah.
archetype, and so Zach could be saying that I have the card that I need to play dragon, and so now I'm just going to try and make the best possible dragon deck that I can. Going into the second pick, we
Ooh.
or the fifth pick here, we have quite a few interesting options once again. So double rainbow energy is
Yeah.
restricted to not work on multi-prizers by this cube's definition. So a lot of Pokemon
Hmm.
that could never take advantage of that effect can here. Giovanni's Charisma is a really powerful option. Any standouts that you're seeing on your side?
Also, I kind of like Lurantis. If you're already thinking about grass energy going into your Regidrago V-Star deck, you can use that flower supply as an option within the deck. That's kind of standing out to me. I think Double Rainbow is probably the strongest card in the pack, but Lurantis might have some mild synergy with you, which also is quite appealing. Those are the ones that are looking at me right now as the couple main
Yeah,
options. And
definitely.
Giovanni is flexible too. Like it's a much less commitment, but still acceleration on your end.
I definitely agree. Have you Giovanni's Charisma is, of course, a really new card. Have you had the opportunity to play with it in many cubes that you've done recently?
No, I honestly haven't. I've got this in my all basics cube where I think it sort of fits that power level, but I do think with so few strong acceleration options within the cube, there will be a number of players where this is a big disruption, and that's actually why we see Zach go for that pick now as well.
Yeah, he does value it really highly here. I think it's a smart pickup. Acceleration, like you said, is really limited in this cube. You generally have to go to great lengths to get that extra energy in play. So Giovanni's Charisma allows you to both accelerate yourself and rewind your opponent, which can be very strong. And Giovanni's Charisma really excels in an environment where you expect your opponent's active Pokemon to survive for the next turn after you attack into it, because um, in that way you get value out of both sides of the card, instead of it just
Yep.
being an attachment for your side. And so I think it makes a ton of sense to pick the card up here. I think it's a really powerful option in a lot of decks.
Zach getting rewarded for being on the Dragon train early as well as Hydreigon EX. You can, as long as there's a stadium in play, reduce the retreat cost of your Dragon types by 2 colorless. So giving yourself that flexibility is already pretty massive. So this is actually a great pickup. One of the dragons that you're probably going to put into play, actually, rather than some that you might be trying to discard for your attacking options.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the most powerful support pieces that the dragon archetype has. Another card that is interesting that I want to call out here is Surprise Time Machine. It is
Mm.
a mutant format all star, and especially in a cube like this, where you might have a Pokemon that does 1 for 40 and accelerates some energy, and then you might have another Pokemon at that same level or at the next level up that you can evolve into that does 4 for 300 and takes a knockout that way. And so,
Yeah.
Surprise Time Machine, always an extremely powerful card in this kind of a cube.
Definitely a card to keep an eye on, and it doesn't take many synergies to really make that card create lots of situations for opponents to at least think twice about, because these are going to be open deck lists as well. So as soon as you draft and play a Surprise Time Machine in your list, it means your opponent has to play so carefully around you the entire games, and that's something to bear in mind. Our players today are looking for 2 wins out of 3 rounds to secure their spot into day 2, where they'll be meeting 4 other competitors who are already qualified into that day 2. It's yourself, Sleight, it's Blue, it's Mysterious Player, and it's a JL. And it's actually going to be a different cube as well that's drafted tomorrow. So make sure to tune into that as well. We're going to be showing, once again, a draft as well as all the gameplay tomorrow. So keeping an eye on the Surprise Time Machine just for how it changes the player perspective in all your games is another good card to think about, just because of the format of this event.
Absolutely. And I've heard you talk about this in drafts past. Time Machine is an effect similar to Gust can be, where once
Yeah,
you have it, your opponent has to play around it, even if you just have the one, because it can be
yeah,
so backbreaking in the right situation.
yeah. It can shut off a lot of lines of play that they'd like to do, because that range is always something that they have to consider, and that's always something that players have to think about in Mutant anyway. That any basic can turn into all sorts of their different stage 1s, and obviously for their stage 2 Pokemon as well. So um, you're already having to think about so many outcomes turn to turn just by nature of a Mutant draft. That adding a Surprise Time Machine to make it even more possible, with like energy scattered around certain Pokemon that may be less significant, becomes terrifying in certain spots.
Absolutely. In addition to the time machine, some interesting cards that I'm seeing here that we might look around some other pools for as the pack
Mm-hmm.
progresses. The Grant can be a really powerful option, both if you're playing fighting and if you're not. If you're playing a deck that needs to discard cards to the discard, often acceleration engines in this cube will use that. Grant can just be a good way to be able to discard a couple cards on command. And so we could see somebody pick that up pretty quickly. The Cinderace VMAX is a newer VMAX that people haven't played around with a ton. I think it's pretty strong. Oh my gosh, and here we actually see a few huge build arounds. We see the Torterra EX, we see the Orbeetle VMAX, and the Delphox Break, all of which are incredibly powerful cards.
Yeah, so let's go into the break evolution mechanic for this cube. So break evolution goes on top of stage 1 Pokemon. You gain the highest hit points of the two, so likely this Delphox will be like gaining hit points in the majority of situations. And as you said, this from deck acceleration once per turn of a fire energy, absolutely crazy. I'm quite surprised to still see it in a pack at this stage. It doesn't seem to have that great synergy within Zak's deck, so I don't begrudge him from not taking that card. Although, again, Fire Energy could be splashed into the deck list, obviously, if you're attacking with Apex Dragon. So just seeing a sort of safe Gladion here, definitely reasonable. But the potential power this early on of seeing a Delphox, I think, could have been a game changer for some of these players.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very surprising to see it this late. It makes me excited to kind of look around at some of these pools and see what people are considering. I do think that the Delphox could have been really powerful in Zak's deck just as a way to get more energy in play, but no harm in taking the responsible play here. I think especially because Zak is so clearly already on an archetype, and the colorless is probably going to be a secondary type in the deck already too.
That's a great thing to think about, where you are positioned in the draft and where your future packs are sort of going to lead you. How much does Zak have to speculate versus just making sure he has that solid baseline to fall back on, knowing that he's already cherry-picked some big pieces, not having to take those huge risks that cards just won't pay off in other certain circumstances. And as we know, Gladion, a really big piece, especially for a deck that Zak's likely looking to build, where he's going to have lots of flexible one-of attackers within his list that he tries to copy overall with Reggie Drago at different points in games. So maybe it's just a different direction that Zak is looking for here rather than splashing in fire, which has a really interesting dynamic in the cube. I think there's identity among a lot of the different type coverages. Fire to me seems like there's definitely a mill element with some of their basic Pokemon and even some of the GX attacks that we have on the higher stages, but also some of the highest damage output options as you'd expect from Fire with those energy acceleration options. So it's sort of serving multiple purposes in this cube.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Interesting here coming into this next pack, there are two, I would say, exceptionally powerful fighting stage ones in Lycanroc GX and Lucario GX. One thing that's interesting about this cube is fighting ends up being the most controlling type a lot of the time because of some of these Lycanroc options, because of super efficient attacks, because of other ways to limit opponents' resources and energies, and this is the wheel, and so we're seeing that people are not interested in fighting yet. How do you feel about that?
It surprises me a lot because I feel like there's a lot of cards I like in Lightning. There's a lot of cards I like in Dark and Colorless, and you're getting coverage into a lot of those types. Obviously, there will be some resistances on the side of the Colorless side of things, but for me, when they're already very efficient attackers, again, it feels like a difficult pick for Zak to take any of these. Like maybe Lycanroc just because you already have Charisma, so having Charisma Lycanroc as a combo is powerful. Could be reasonable for him. I think Training Court and Sabrina are both also very reasonable picks here for Zak. Yeah, it looks like he's leaning towards Court. It really is him saying that he wants to be heavily in Dragon. I think with 89 picks, I wouldn't mind a speculation of a fighting guy there.
Yeah, I wouldn't dislike it either. I think the Training Court is a very powerful card for Zak's deck, so I don't necessarily fault him, especially because his deck is already so defined. But I do wonder kind of what's going on around the table. Is everybody in the situation where they feel like they're in a super defined deck already? I struggle to see that necessarily being the case. And so, full disclosure, my own biases, I love fighting in this cube. I think it's really powerful. It's really flexible. And so seeing some of these all-star fighting cards all in the same pack wheeling is surprising to me.
Yeah, there are some one energy efficient attackers in other types, but it feels like fighting kind of does it the best, especially with those type coverages that you can boast. So, me too. I'm a little surprised to not see more excitement for fighting. I definitely want part of that to be in whatever type I was in, even if it was these sort of thin packages. As we have another pick here, not too much for Zak, I don't think. Do you take Volkner as just a Skylar effect here with potential future upside? Don't think you ever really want to splash lightning energy into your deck. Maybe you just take a speculative basic.
Yeah, definitely. I think Olympia can be a powerful inclusion in a
Mhm.
deck like this. There's a decent chance Zach ends up with some lightning type dragons, so that's always an option. But no particularly thrilling picks, I would say, coming out of this pack for sure. Um, Zach does go for the Olympia. While we're kind of looking at these late stage packs, I'm gonna go back to a topic that you addressed a couple picks ago, which was 2-day event, of course. So today's cube, very atypical, very interesting, not something that a lot of people have seen before. Tomorrow's cube, same thing. Tomorrow's cube is the coin flip cube, which allows everyone to decide the outcomes of coin flips on their own turn, aside from a couple of things like Illima and Confusion. But so that ends up being a very interesting cube as well. So we really have a weekend of, I think, really exciting spectator experiences in terms of what people are going to be pulling out and aiming to accomplish. And Zach here goes for the Reshizard. That's very interesting.
Well, Farangi could easily work with Reggie Drago, and this is a decent standalone stage one. Tag teams are two prize stage ones in this cube, and can't evolve. You can't evolve out of them. But Outrage is still a very dangerous attack. You have high damage outputs. It seems like Zach already turned away some good acceleration options, that Delphox earlier, but maybe thinking of like a very greedy wheel to really get
I feel like
rewarded
that
for
has
this
to be
pick.
it.
Yeah.
I feel like that has to be it. Zach must be thinking, oh, well, that Delphox came way later than it should have. And this Reshizard is coming way later than it should as well. And so
Hmm.
maybe I can really just get into the best possible fire deck from this situation. I've got a few dragons that are really nice, but I don't necessarily need to commit to them to such a great extent that I ignore all of these other signals that I'm seeing. And interestingly, too, Zach did decide not to take the Rayquaza, the Mega Rayquaza, which can be a
Yeah.
powerful stage one attacker in his secondary type, which is colorless right now. And so maybe he's really thinking that this fire thing could come together.
Yeah. The Mega Rayquaza with that colorless attack cost so easy to like weave in no matter where you go. So I would sort of give it bonus points for flexibility. We have the Breeders' Fields being picked up here, flipping for some evolution Pokemon. Some Pokemon that you wouldn't always expect are being treated as stage ones in this cube. So tag teams and V-Stars can be searched as if they were stage one Pokemon. Same thing for Mega Evolving Pokemon. They count as stage ones. So this is at least a decent search card to pick up now. It could help grab your Drago.
Item-based search cards in these kinds of environments are always so powerful, and Pokemon Breeder Fields is a little bit worse than a Timer Ball, but a Timer Ball
Yeah.
is pretty strong. Zach does wield that dragon in the pack here, which could be a pretty strong indication that yes, this dragon lane is open. It's not as though somebody else is kind of cutting him on it. He's just not seeing a lot in this first pack. Pokemon Center Lady is another interesting card, but notably, we see Pokemon Center Lady as an all-star in a lot of cubes, but in this one, with the HP numbers being so high, it's a lot
Hmm.
less likely that you get this critical, pivotal heal 60 play that you often see the card generate.
Yeah, there are some cubes where it buys back an entire turn. In this cube, it's probably going to be like half a turn recovered at best, if you're thinking about it in those sorts of terms. And that isn't a huge amount of like amazing status conditions. There are some cheeky like paralysis attack and poison attack options, but there aren't a huge number of them that I think are a detriment to the point where you have to respect it massively at this point in the draft anyway.
Agreed. And it seems like the other drafters at the table are kind of on the same page. I'm interested now. So I don't think we have a ton of super exciting picks left for Zach, other than maybe that super late wheel Delphox. So I'm gonna hop us through a couple of different draft tabs just to see what people
Yeah,
have going on.
yeah,
Oh
that would
my! All
be.
right, maybe I'm not. I'm seeing getting a little bit of a bug myself on this draft tab.
Okay, well, I can see Adam's getting a late beach by the looks of things. Apsy seems to be the one who has ended up with quite a decent amount of fighting, has Lucario, Lycanroc, Buzzwole, Stonejourner, and is picking up a Zygarde here as well, so they're pretty heavy on fighting. They seem to have picked a lane fairly early. PG Pichu has a lot of psychic stuff already picked up. They've got the Lele, which was a great early search. They've got Alakazam EX, which is a pretty decent sort of spread option to tick you over with some damage. I can see a decent amount of dark stuff being picked up early for broken femurs. And at the moment, it looks like Warriors is going towards mostly water. Luminion, a great pickup early. Has the Metagross GX as well, one of the best energy acceleration options I think we have from an ability in this cube. A lot of the time, it's going to be like cheap attackers that have acceleration inbuilt. But in this case, you can use a great ability to get things going.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like my stream tab is fixing back up. So just diving into these pools a little bit. Looks like we have kind of a commitment to Psychic from PGP2.
Yep.
See the basic Alakazam EX, Gengar Mimikyu maybe is the card that really pushed them toward the
Sure.
archetype. Those are the kind of the things that I'm looking at as we jump through these different pools just quickly. What are some of those big cards that really made them interested in that deck?
Seems like everyone seems to be picking lanes and not too much crossover for resources right now from what I'm seeing. So things seem to be working out quite well for most of our drafters. I think Zach was one pick away from Delphox Break coming back, actually, which would have been a huge payoff for him. Didn't quite work out.
Amazing.
Yeah, but at least picks up another colorless basic, which I think is handy to go alongside that Squawkabilly. Gives you the coverage if ever you just draft into Sylvali now, you can quite happily take that. And there are some other fantastic ones, like keeping Pidgeot EX open would be crazy. Keeping Togekiss VMAX also seems like a powerful card. These are ones that I have on my radar for those like selling points as we get into pack number 2 now.
Definitely. And interestingly, Sebastian seems to be the recipient of all of those super powerful late fire cards. All in the second half of the pack, he picked up Magma Basin, Giant Heart, Cinderace VMAX, and Delphox Break. So I think that he's probably pretty happy to have had so many things defined for him in those last few picks there.
Yeah, that's great value when you can get those debatable first picks that we were thinking about later on in the pack and just have other flexible cards. Seems like a big bonus. Some interesting supporters here. The options of Iono, Sycamore, which has bigger upside in a Dragon deck because you're looking for discard synergy for your attacking lines, is the first debate I think Zach has to have here in pack number 2.
Definitely, yeah, and that does make this a more difficult pick than you'd be used to. Normally, I think a lot of drafters would take the Iono before the Sycamore, especially in the situation here. Zach doesn't have a way to disrupt his opponent's hand, but because those discard outlets are so valuable to him, it could change the way that he evaluates it. Like you were saying, VS Seeker is also a really powerful option here. Given that Zach doesn't have a ton of powerful supporters yet, I would say he's probably more likely to take the Iono or the Sycamore, but maybe he's even thinking about the Naganadel just being a draw option that is in his types, but I think that's probably a little less likely than the other supporters here.
I feel with the strength of the pack, you've got to expect that to be whealable, to be honest with you.
Surely. Yeah, you would think so. Cherish Ball, too, they're pretty easily defined, or pretty easy to define cards here that would go before that Naganadel.
But yeah, having a good chance of maybe even like a Lily coming back to you, Castaway. These are possible cards coming back to you as well. So you've got to be happy opening a pack like this. Does lean towards the Sycamore, and I think that is just a testament to the deck that Zach's trying to build, where it's more about the synergy than the inherent strength of the card.
Definitely. And I think, too, that it shows that Zach has this level of understanding of what his deck needs to do and the pieces that need to go into that to make the overall game plan successful, which is critical, especially for something like Dragons, which aren't as straightforward as a lot of the other types in this cube can be. This pack is significantly less exciting, I would say. You've got a Teammates, which is a really powerful card in this cube because there are so many single prize Pokemon and so many opportunities to use it. Aurora Energy, of course, powerful in a deck that wants to use as many types as this one.
Yeah.
Any standouts to you here?
Well, Aurora's discard synergy as well, which you've also noted, which I think is also like a low-key upside. We've already picked Gladion, so I'm less interested in Town Map. I think I'm taking probably just Lynette's or Teammates here. It's like a uninspiring pick, but they seem like decent enough. Yeah.
I think Lynette might lose a little bit of value in Zach's deck because he's so incentivized to just play as many dragons as possible. Like, he does have this walk ability, but Lynette's needing to find 3 different types of Pokemon could be a bit of a downside for this kind of a deck. And dragons aren't really punished in the same way that a lot of other types are for investing heavily in the single type, because dragons' weaknesses are either dragon, which, Zach just takes up all the dragons, then he doesn't have to worry about that. Fairy, which doesn't exist in the cube, and then nothing. And so he really can just stay super firmly on this dragon angle, and he doesn't really need to diversify that typing as much to avoid auto losses.
Like a handful of decent basics here. We've got Gumshoe's GX, which could offer you a decent GX attack, and we know there's some element of colorless within the list.
The ability too can be very powerful in a cube like this, where the opponent does have so many options on a given turn. Having access to their hand is a really under I would say maybe an effect that people don't respect to the level that it could be used in a cube like this. But yeah, to what you said, the Tapu Koko GX and Keldeo EX are both incredibly powerful basic Pokemon, really for a lot of decks. I don't know if Zach is super interested in the Koko, but I could see him picking up the Keldeo both as the powerful Russian ability, and then also as a way to get into potential water evolutions that might be valuable to him.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Already has the Lapras V as well, so it's sort of panning out that he's just picking these up as he goes, and maybe it could give him a nice, like, beneficial secondary type coverage. Water has some nice, like, spread approach, not only attacks but also abilities, and I do think spread is, like, fairly valuable in the cube as well, so I think that could be reasonable. Yeah, we are seeing the Keldeo.
Let's go
I think
for the Keldeo.
I'm leaning to Gumshoes because, like you said, with so few ability draw options, a lot of these draw effects from supporters are just going to be a handful of cards, and there's not that much refresh. So I would have liked information myself, but the Keldeo is definitely an easy choice as well because just more flexibility is never a bad thing.
Yeah, I think Gumshoes would have been a really powerful pickup there for sure. But maybe Zach is seeing some synergies in the water line that could really be to his benefit here. And water is certainly a versatile secondary type, so I'll be interested to see how that pans out for him. Here, I think he's got a kind of a slam dunk pick here in the Holin's Magneton. That
Yeah.
really shores up a lot of his energy concerns in a deck like Dragon that does need to play so many different types to attack.
This pack is wild. Weavile GX seems very strong as that stage 1 options. The Metagross GX could come round for a different player in our pack, which is going to be a massive pick for them. They could get double Metagross established very early and really build towards that, which I think is big. Maybe they even have a chance of getting Melmetal back, which I think is huge. Urshifu VMAX obviously very powerful. So, Lily's Full Force is the choice here.
The pickup here. Interesting. Maybe Zach is really concerned about his ability to set up and stay consistent.
Yeah, it's a draw 4, but then at the end of your turn, if you have 3 or more cards in hand, shuffle cards from your hand into the deck until you have 2 cards remaining. Could even be trying to unlock your research maybe on a future turn. You could just like hold research in a dragon or something like that, so you have that like mid-game burst reload without having to worry about losing resources. That's one of the only things that comes to my mind as like a combo option within the hand, because a draw 4 with such a significant downside does feel a little bit awkward to weave in.
Yeah, we've seen quite a few cases where Lily's Full Force has been played in really successful decks around the group just as a draw supporter. But given that the Holin's Magneton is such a powerful option for Zach,
Yeah.
I am a little surprised by this pickup here. But
There's
could be too
one
that he's seen
Magneton and
some.
yeah. Go on.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a new pack here, and it's more exciting for Zach than the last one. I don't know if I'd say it's more exciting in a vacuum, but he's got more options here.
I definitely like Volcanium, but I don't know if this deck's ever going to play enough water energy to make it work. Magcargo's certainly powerful. Bolton's very good early acceleration. Again, they're just not piece it. I think this is an opportunity for a garbage run here for me.
Yeah, I really like the garbage run. In Mutant Draft, you generally need to focus on recovery to an extreme degree because recovering your most powerful attackers, it can be very easy to chain them one into the next. He actually goes for the Mallow here, which I find interesting, but the Bolton's V to just to expand on something that you said there, it's a very good acceleration option, but it's also a great option for damage. Lightning has a lot of ability to get a ton of energy in play with its different attacks. And so I've seen several situations in this cube where Bolton V just ends up being an incredible later, like mid to late game option to just put a basic in play that can deal over 200 damage for no cost.
Yeah, there's a few lightning Pokemon that can keep that chain going of energy. There's Mega Manectric, there's Pikarom, good old Pikarom is still one of the best ways that we can get energy into play. So if you lean heavily into lightning, that could be huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the Lightning Drafter at the table is going to be very happy to see that when they finally do see it. Um, Interesting pickups here. I think Viridian Forest is a really strong pickup for
Yeah.
Zach just because it finds the correct types of energy. It gets the energy, or it gets the Pokemon in the discard that he wants to copy with Regidrago. Um, there are interesting options here. Oh, actually goes for the Latias EX. Maybe he thinks that Barrier Break and Bright Down, or especially the Bright Down, could be a way to really stave off some threatening Pokemon from the opponent's side.
Yeah, the Bright Down prevents effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by Pokemon with abilities, and abilities are an overarching effect in this cube. So if there are Pokemon in the cube that don't have abilities, if they have a power or a body, they are under the umbrella of abilities. So Latias is covering a lot here of attackers, even though its damage output
Yeah,
isn't
very
amazing. It's still a huge headache for any opponent.
can buy him a lot of time, and maybe some of the picks that Zach is taking here indicate
Just gonna,
that he's afraid that he's being contested on some of these dragons. He actually switches over to the Viridian here,
yeah, I think I
which
agree with
I
this
like
as well.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If we could get Aurora on the comeback, we can have this Viridian. I think we're going to solve a lot of our discard issues early with this Viridian pickup.
yeah,
And we also have to think about contesting stadiums is actually massive because there are 4 copies of Path to the Peak in this draft, and that covers all Rulebox Pokemon. So that could be a decent chunk of Pokemon there.
yeah. Path to the Peak, very powerful. This cube has quite a few interesting ways to punish different things. So it has Curse Stone, which we see in this pack here. It has Desert Ruins. It
Yeah.
has 4 copies of Path to the Peak. It has a copy of Shrine of Punishment. And so
Hmm.
there are many, many reasons why you would want to have ways to fight the Stadium War.
So we have a
Oh
9
wow, a
card
couple of
pack
great
here.
cards
Are
for
we
him
are we
here.
slamming Noivern, or are we taking Rayquaza as a self-accelerating option? It can get the
I think
grass
both
energy
are
that can
excellent.
really help out. Yeah. Do you feel like Noivern is like maybe the more wheelable card because some people just randomly pick up basics that little bit more, especially one that can self-accelerate in the best case scenario?
I would say Noivern is probably a little bit more likely to come back. Rayquaza can be
Yeah.
a really powerful option, both as a splash in a grass deck or a lightning deck, which do both get a lot of energy in play.
Yeah.
Rayquaza can be a basic that both accelerates an energy that you can then move around with grass, or it's just a basic Pokemon that only needs 2 attachments or accelerations of some kind, and then is suddenly a tremendous threat, which is very valuable at that basic level. But Noivern GX or EX is just so powerful. Both of its attacks, you can block out the basics, which is not as strong in a cube like this, where pretty much everything can evolve. But
Hmm.
the dominating Echo is just a really cost-effective, disruptive attack, and the stats on the card are fantastic.
Yeah, well, you do already have the Chaos Wheel, which is maybe why I was leaning a bit more to the Rayquaza EX.
That is very
Sorry,
true.
GX.
Yeah.
But this is more damage, and more damage is still pretty handy, I suppose. But now we're really just trying to lay a lock on someone. Maybe it leans towards Zach wanting to have that as an option for himself, alongside maybe Path to the Peak, which we haven't seen any of yet for him, as we're back on the wheel now, and there is the Naga pickup. So he does get rewarded for passing that along quite easily. I think there's another Psychic Naganadel coming down these packs as well later down the line, so that could be another pickup to start getting Ultra Conversion online. It's one of these weird situations where you're looking for cards outside of your type now. You're just looking for the Ultra Beast tag to be fuel for your draw.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think Zach is pretty happy, not necessarily surprised to see the Naganadel come back here, but maybe some of those concerned about Dragon not being an open lane are kind of assuaged by seeing this
Hmm.
Naganadel come back. Just because it is a pretty solid dragon Pokemon. There's a lot of
Yep.
different application that you can get out of it, both between the attack and the ability. Injection GX is not necessarily a powerful GX attack, but it's got enough going for it that I don't think he's too concerned about that.
That's actually a great sign for Zach, I think, because I'd be tempted as a drafter in this cube just to take Naganadels anyway, especially on a pack 2 of 5 here, just to think about how many options to draw there are in the cube. So this is a real indication for Zach that there isn't many Dragon drafters, and possibly just underselling Naganadel generally here.
Yeah, definitely. And interestingly, there are 3 Dragon Naganadels in the cube.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it can be an engine to itself, which is very. Oh wow, he got the Aurora back. So I'm
We
sure
like it. It's
it
snap
immediately
picked.
picks that
Well
up.
identified there. That is one of the big skills of cubing, of course. You see cards that are helpful to you, but then you also have to assess how helpful are they to other people and how likely are they in, especially in stronger packs, to come back to you. These are the calculations our players are always weaving into their picks. So when we're thinking about cards that stare us in the face, some of these drafters are on that next level of knowing that you're sort of in the draft and seeing what's being taken and what's being valued. You can make these assessments and get still eventually the right card for your deck, but also Zach was able to pick up a stronger card earlier on in these packs as well.
Absolutely. And I think something like Aurora Energy, understanding the value that that brings to his deck is can be a higher level draft skill as well, just because usually people see the discard off of Aurora Energy as a cost, and so
Mm-hmm.
kind of identifying, oh, this effect that is usually a downside in pretty much all the decks that have played it in standard is actually strong for me. It's favorable, and so really understanding what the card does outside of the context of how it's been used in constructed formats before. I think that's a telltale sign of a strong drafter oftentimes.
So in terms of our checklist for Zach, we've got Viridian, we've got Aurora. That's going to help him on his way. We've even got the Giovanni's Charisma. These are some big pieces. We are lacking some of the more explosive dragon attackers right now, but we are still pretty early on in the draft. So I think what's sort of next on Zach's checklist of cards to pick up as we go to those later packs?
I think he's really looking for a good source of damage. Both of the Dragonite GXs can be extremely powerful. Rayquaza VMAX to some extent, not quite so high priority. The Gumshoes GX does come back here. That's really nice.
Oh yeah.
The Altaria EX is not necessarily as powerful of an attacker, but it is a great option for dragon types. Same with ADP is actually in this cube. You're not allowed to use the GX attack, so it doesn't devolve the game state quite to the extent that it did before. But I think Zach would be really happy to have the option to Ultimate Ray in this deck.
Gumshoe's refused once again by Zach in favor of Altar of the Moon. Maybe that's an indication that he's looking for, again, like Scramble Energy as an option within the deck, as well as the Aurora that's already been picked up for just even more retreat options. And may also just be
Definitely.
thinking, if I take away stadiums from other people, maybe my stadium lock gets stronger with my attacks from Noivern and Giratina. That seems to have been highlighted really early from Zach. So I think he has this plan to lock some oppressive stadium in at some point with this draft.
Definitely could be. I think Dragon is one of the single strongest, might be just the best archetype to use effects like Path to the Peak, because so much of its value is in the attacks and in the
Mm-hmm.
Regidrago. And so
Yeah,
definitely
gets
something
the
to
Naga
consider
back.
there. Very nice.
No
Alter
surprise
the
there.
Moon as well. The Alter the Moon as well can be a powerful option in this deck for Zach, just because Psychic and Dark Energy are types that he already wants to play, and
Mm.
so because of the Noivern, and so he sees this as, oh, this is a nominally beneficial stadium for me, and also it can help me accomplish this potential goal of sticking Path to the Peak or something like that.
Yeah, could be pretty nice. It's cool to see some of our other drafters. There's a Melmetal as well as a Sizzle that can come back for our Metal drafter. They seem to be having a great start so far. Who is it that's in Metal right now? Is it Pichu that's in Metal? No, it is definitely. I thought someone was on Metal. Maybe they've just given up on that line. Oh, I think it's Warriors. Yeah, Warrior Z.
Yes, let's okay, so it seems like Warriors wasn't quite sure what direction to go in the very first
Mm-hmm.
pack, but the Metagross GX pickup early on was really nice for them. And then they've actually picked up a second Metagross
Yeah,
GX in this pack, in addition to some other stuff. I mean, really, if they just get Pokemon to attack with at this point, they've got their engine.
yeah. That engine is
Two
absolutely
Metagross GX
incredible.
in the
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great turn of fortune for them.
That was a standard deck. Just having two Metagross on the board was pretty much all you needed. You could just retreat, bounce between these, Geotech system, do the thing. And Algorithm GX is
Retreat,
actually
Max
probably
Potion.
really good. Yeah, exactly. He's just playing
Yeah, I do
standard
think
right now.
algorithm. Algorithm can definitely be a nice GX attack in a cube like this. Metal does have the benefit of having some extraordinarily powerful GX attacks, notably Soul Burst GX. We talked about this a little bit before the stream, and if Warriors is able to get into that, then could be an incredibly powerful option as well, both for the damage and the ability and the GX attack. Given that
Yeah,
the Metagross GX is already in the deck, the attack is now suddenly, oh, I can just hit for 230 every single turn that I land an attachment.
that honestly sounds terrifying. I think Warriors is in a great position so far in this draft.
Absolutely.
That's getting both. It just opens up so many more lines of play for him later down the line. So that seems pretty powerful. Might be
Zach
also
Krekeler
looking for some
here.
discard synergy cards. Yeah. There's Curse Stone. What do you think about Curse Stone in a draft like this?
I think it's pretty good, but I think it's very hard to find a home for. Oftentimes, in many mutant environments, this one is no exception to that. Abilities are omnipresent, especially powers abilities, whichever environment you're playing in, and so to have a deck that can take advantage of something like Curse Stone could make Curse Stone a very valuable piece to have, especially for the Dragon archetype, which has a lot of ways to deal like 2-hit KOs or almost 1-hit KOs on some of the biggest Pokemon. Um, the Dragon archetype notably has, I'm looking at all of the cards now, just a few powers, not
Yeah,
a lot, especially compared to other types. And
for
so
sure.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for Zach to take advantage of that. I also know that Zach as a player just loves playing Cursed Stone. It's definitely a favorite part of his. And so we could see it in the final draft.
There's no doubt that Zach's scheming here because even picking up the Skyro Bridge there, I think he's definitely planning to have some sort of stadium control in this draft. Maybe sensing that other people have undersold some stadiums that have been on the wheel a few times, and he's been happy to just pick away at these throughout the draft. So I think he's definitely scheming to take some paths later. Because even though, oh, and here we go straight away in this pack. This is a really interesting choice for Zach actually. Where do we go from here? Latias, Prism, Black Hiram, some of your highest damage outputs. Um, just generic good cards like Jirachi, Sinlin, also very good. More discard synergy. There's a lot to like here.
Yeah, this is an incredibly difficult pick for Zach, but for all the right reasons. Professor Oak's new theory and Sinlin are both incredibly powerful supporter options. Rosa can also be a strong option, but I think it's probably a little bit below the other two. I think Black Hurim is a pretty safe wheel, especially in a pack of this strength, but Latias Star might be a powerful enough option that Zach doesn't feel like he should pass it, just because if it does get snapped up by somebody, then it would be a pretty big blow to his deck. That said, I don't think he needs to be too worried about it, but he does only get one wheel here. And
Yeah,
so he has to decide whether he thinks getting both of the dragons is more valuable than one of the supporters and one of the dragons, whether he thinks that there's a chance that somebody else speculates into his Latias because that card is something that he would really want to have. So yeah, this is a great pack for Zach, but I don't envy his position here.
no, it feels so bad in a pack this strength just to take the Latias. I feel like it has to be the best pick here because we've already passed on Lurantis, we've already passed on Delphox Break, we've even passed on a Rayquaza EX, which is a tiny bit of acceleration. Oh, it's going to Sinlin though, so
It
just
goes to the
certainly a
Sinlin.
generically strong card, discard synergy as well. So it is a strong card, but it means we're definitely giving up on one of these dragon options.
I think he's
We can't,
probably just
yeah,
banking on the Latias coming back here, just because
yeah,
other people around the table. You've got Jirachi, Super Rod, Ponce, Rosa,
yeah, that's coming
Pokekid,
back for
Hapu,
sure.
another Sinlin. Like you always get it back. So I think he's just okay giving up one of the dragons here
Yeah.
for greater consistency.
And Black Hiram is more replaceable. You've already mentioned some Dragonite GX for high damage output, so if
Yeah, I
randomly
think
you spot someone on that, that's fine as well. But like you said, there are easily 6 better cards in these packs for anyone even speculating Dragon.
definitely. And I think Black Huron EX is really kind of an undesirable damage option for most of the Dragon decks just because of that discard 3 energy downside. If you're going to be discarding 3 energy, you kind of want to be going for the Rayquaza VMAX or the Dragonite GX that you get more damage out of for similar cost. And so I think that would be a good basic option for Zach, but if he can avoid using it for damage, I think he probably would like to.
We don't see a
Here,
fantastic pack
yeah,
for this
not
next one for Zach.
super interesting. This is kind of like a Looker's, Erica's Hospitality, Night Maintenance. Zach is getting up to a number of tag teams where I think tag call is a totally reasonable pick.
True.
But yeah, a lot of solid picks, but nothing that's immediately like, oh man, this makes the deck.
Yeah, it might even just be that tag call or night maintenance. Again, it's one of those things where it doesn't feel great taking these cards this early. But if you just bank that night maintenance now, it saves you a headache later down the line where you could have a stronger pack and then you're weighing up a night maintenance versus something else. Also, he just passed the super rod. In an admittedly strong pack, maybe he thinks the rod can come back to him, so that could also be playing on his mind right now. Just going to be the Erika's hospitality, which again you can't really question too much, with some questionable or few and far between Pokemon draw options. Supporter draw is still very premium in this draft.
Definitely. And there are a solid chunk of supporters in this draft that are just all right. And that's by design. The tempo of this cube is not ripping fast or anything like that. So if Zach can make the tempo of his deck closer to ripping fast, and this pack is just a heartbreak. Holy cow.
2 double Dragon Energy in the cube, another way that you have that acceleration just for your end, but it's alongside Noivern. There's Heat Factory, which could have been decent, especially if you lock that in. There's lots of good Ball Search. 2 Cherish Balls and Nest in this pack.
And
This is
Chorus's
wild.
Experiment is a fantastic draw option too. So
Yeah.
and Zinnia is another discard outlet.
Zinnia
So
discard synergy. Yeah. This is a
yeah,
crazy
he
pack.
takes the double dragon kind of out of obligation. I mean, that is one of the biggest benefits of being in the dragon archetype, but man, it is really sad to see it up against all of these knockout cards when he could almost certainly get it, pick 6, pick 7 easily.
It means again he could get one of these supporters back, possibly. Maybe he gets Nest Ball on the turnaround. At the very least, Noivern's coming back. You can say that with pretty strong confidence. So you're not
Yeah, I
giving
think
up on that card.
there are a couple of cards in this pack that are so powerful in their respective archetypes. Pika Rom, Heat Factory, Malamar VMAX is very powerful. So
Yep.
you could easily end up in a situation where you wheel a very powerful trainer from this pack on the go around.
Yeah, I think that's actually going to work out pretty nicely for Zach here. Like you say, even Chorus or Zinnia is like the worst case scenario. Well, Nest Ball might
Yeah,
be worst case here, honestly, but these are all great.
yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a nice pack on the second time around. Zach is in a good seat for it. This is pick 3, so he's going to see it when there are a few cards left. I think the last couple in the pack are probably going to be the Flareon, the Wishy Washy. Although
Right.
Zach is probably going to have to decide whether he wants to take the trainer that he gets back over the Noivern, because I cannot imagine that card goes alongside some of these
No.
others.
Yeah, it's just more flexibility. Another way to lock out special energy. When I do think that Scramble Energy is going to be a huge energy card for a lot of different archetypes. So having Chaos Wheel and also both Noivern to help establish that just super early on in a game and completely brick wall people out of that may just be, again, part of the strategy here. So knowing that Noivern is almost definitely on the return is pretty helpful as we come into the next pack. Scramble Switch, we haven't picked up an ace spec just yet. There's the option of Eldegoss, which seems powerful. Pikarom into Choo Choo for a lightning player is interesting. The cast form as well stands out to me as probably the strongest one here.
Yeah, I think the Lightning player is going to be very happy with the progression of cards in this pack. Yeah, so a few interesting cards here. Cast form, I think, like you said, very very powerful. Bodybuilding dumbbells, if considering Zach's strategy is centered on a stage 1, can be a very powerful option. And then Scramble Switch is actually a card. Oh, he does go for the Scramble Switch.
Yeah,
I think it's an amazing ace spec for Dragon Deck,
yeah,
because you have these huge attackers. Your energy is kind of inflexible, and so being able to just switch into some other huge Pokemon after attacking with a huge Pokemon, and eliminating that element of risk and potentially denying your opponent a couple of prizes off of a Drago can just be backbreaking.
yeah. It moves special energy and basic energy with this effect. So again, just moving that double dragon can burst some new attacker onto the board effectively. So that could also be just absolutely massive. There are some high energy requirement dragon types, so that's definitely going to be a handy pick because we're into the next pack here. There is the Latios twins. This is obviously a stage 1 Pokemon for him. I don't think it's that powerful, but it is high damage output.
The GX attack on this one can be pretty strong, and Zach does actually snap it up probably for that reason. It's the damage is solid, but the GX attack can really enable you to set up your board effectively. especially in tandem with the scramble switch that Zach has already picked up in the
True.
previous pack. Missing out on the retriever here is kind of rough, and Zach has actually passed a ton of recovery at this point. So that's something that
Yeah.
we need to think about as this draft continues, both in the context of Zach's pool and in the context of other players' pool. You know, if each of these recovery cards, maybe a few players have picked up a couple of them, then suddenly everyone is going to be fighting for these recovery, or just about everyone is going to be fighting for these recovery cards later in the draft.
I think there's currently Super Rod out there, Night Maintenance out there, and Retriever out there, at least in Zach's mind right now. So maybe one of those comes back to him, and that will be a huge win. Because I feel like there was definitely an easy choice for a Night Maintenance to be the safe pick earlier on in a draft. But Zach's playing aggressive right now and hoping to get one back. Got the Altara
Definitely.
EX. This is actually a really strong, it's just a 100 hit point Pokemon, but it's actually a big card for some other archetypes as well. I actually think it's so weird to see these really squishy Pokemon actually be like selling point accelerators in this cube.
Yeah, Altaria EX incredibly flexible because it doesn't need to attach water energy or to a
Hmm.
water Pokemon. It can just attach to any two prize stage two, which pretty much always going to be a VMAX or an EX in this case. But there are lots of those that are powerful and that you would want to be able to attach free energy to. Although not something that Zach is going to be so concerned about, I don't
No.
think. The dragon archetype being totally open, he's not fighting anyone. He's probably going to get his double dragons. He's going to have other ways to get energy in play, but someone is going to be really happy with that. Here,
Ooh,
I don't
sigh
know
of
about you, but I
relief.
would really like to see the ordinary rod. Yeah.
It's the sigh of relief. I think Zach might end up getting two this round of packs. He'll get this ordinary rod, and he has a good chance of either the super rod or the Pokemon retrieval, I think. I think the night maintenance is probably gone because we were already considering it in the last pack, so it's almost definitely being taken down the line. But I think he has a non-zero chance here to get that super rod back, and then I think he's set after this pack. So this is a perfect pack for Rod. Honestly, not too much else helps him out too much. There's even a chance of getting a
Definitely.
supporter back on the wheel that could be flexible. So, like, yeah, this is just a huge win. It's exactly what Zach wanted to see.
Absolutely, yeah. Pack that he doesn't have to evaluate much against. It's just an easy recovery pickup. Interestingly, because this cube is so resource intensive, because knockouts do take so much, because games run so long, I value 3 recovery cards in most decks. And so the ordinary rod, the super rod, I'd still like to see a third picked up from Zach. We'll see if the other players at the table are kind of thinking along those lines, but it's always a toss up as to whether, especially with the amount of experience that many of them have had in the cube, whether they consider that themselves. Couple of good dragons here for Zach.
Look at this. There's Ultra Necrozma, which is a strong attacking basic, obviously. There's Rayquaza VMAX, which can be a mini draw engine and some of the highest damage output. And there's even the Moltres Zapdos Articuno, which doesn't necessarily have to work in his deck, but if he's already playing funky energy attacking lines and has some colorless basics, he could weave this in. The Sky Legends GX is one of the most powerful GX attacks I think we have out there. So there's a lot going on in this pack. There's even strong, like, Fan Club's still just a strong generic card as well, honestly. So there's so much here. We're going safe with
Yeah,
the basic, I think.
this is a pretty strong pack for him this late, especially. I think we could see if Sebastian is comfortable with the fire archetype, he might be able to see the Zapmal Kuno and understand that he can get into that pretty effectively with the acceleration that he's already got. So that might be a
Mm,
way that we see the card played, or maybe we just won't see it played at all. I don't think it's going to come back to Zach necessarily. I think he'll probably
no.
see something like the fighting memory on the wheel. Um, but yeah, this a couple of really nice options for him. But it seems that he values that alternate Cosmo really highly because he snapped it almost immediately.
Yeah. And we're back to our initial pack, and as expected, Sleight is going to be Latias that comes back here. Having to pass up on Black Kyurem, but we did just pick up an Ultra Necrozma for a potential high damage output option. So maybe we're leaning more towards those Psych Energies coming into the deck more and more. I'm seeing now with the Latis pickup and the Ultra Necrozma pickup, I think we're going to be playing some really interesting energy counts for Zach. Maybe not even playing Grass or Fire too much at all and just relying on Special Energy to power up the Drago and use
Yeah,
some of
I
these other
could see
Pokemon
a
physically.
I could see a token count of each one just for the Viridian
Yeah.
searchability, but I definitely agree with you. I think this energy line is going to look really interesting. Notably, the Latias works even better with the scramble switch pickup once again because
Mm-hmm.
you can attach a couple of energy to Pokemon that you don't necessarily intend to attack with, and then scramble switch those energy onto other Pokemon. So I really, really like that ace spec in this deck, and I think Zach is playing to its strengths really effectively.
That's such a great thing to point out. You're one of a spec going with a prism, which is only a one of as well. It's a cool thematic thing coming on here as we're getting into, again, continuing through this wheel. Are we thinking of taking away a card from a player at this point, or are we picking up Tag Call? Yeah, Tag Call's
Yeah, very nice tag call for Zach here, I think, with the Sinlin in the pool. Now got the Latios in the pool, and I'm sure by the end of the draft, there's a solid chance he'll pick up an ADP or something to that effect. That will also be a really nice card
is huge for the deck as well. The amount of stadiums we have, double dragon energy,
double dragon.
Yeah, that could be
absolutely
a huge pickup
right.
for him. He's going to start prioritizing Guzhalas. I think there are 3 of them in the draft. Yeah, so I don't think you've seen any. I don't think he's passed any. So even though it's a powerful effect, he's got a decent shot of getting one of those back. Notably, we did see someone else pick up a Path to the Peak in his first wheel. So we know there's someone trying to build within Path as well, which might be something that he has to consider.
Path to the Peak got somebody thinking. There are a couple of really strong lightning cards in here. The Zeraora V-Star is an incredibly. Oh my gosh! I guess there's just no lightning drafter.
Zinnia Wheeling as well. Zinnia was valued under Colress. Wow, that's interesting.
I think that's reasonable. Colress's Experiment does end up being a really powerful draw option for a lot of decks, and so the Zinnia, I think, is a little bit more appealing to Zach for the discard synergy, whereas a lot of decks would prefer not to. I think the Pikarom wheel is absolutely crazy. I think the totally wide open lightning deck is just shocking because of pun unintended, but I think the lightning being totally opening is really surprising because it is both very flexible and very powerful.
Is that just an indication that we haven't seen those Mega Manetrics just yet, and we haven't seen other pieces? I think so far we've seen the tag team Pokemon, we've seen Tapu Koko Prism, I think, and GX, but still a large portion of that lightning might just be in the bottom end of this draft.
Wait a minute. Somebody took the Raichu. So somebody passed Pikarom and then took Raichu.
They don't have to go together, but I feel like they would synergize quite nicely.
I think you would want them in the same deck, probably. But it is an interesting situation. We did see the Bolton V early in the pack too, which is really nice, and we saw the Vikavolt V, which did wheel for Zach, but maybe the Lightning Drafter thinks that their draft is so open that they can do that. I'm definitely
there is no Lightning Drafter at the moment, so I think it is the case that people have picked pieces and then mostly ignored, and I actually think there's been no Mega Manetric at all just yet. So, or Rotom V as well. I feel like that's a really big card. Like some of those sorts of I think we've seen Zeraora GX in a couple pieces, but it feels like Lightning's just not going to be drafted here, which is jaw-dropping for me because I think going into this draft I would have definitely considered that as like one of the big pieces, but we're just going to see an abnormal amount of Lightning in the last couple of packs here, and people will all be stunned by them wheeling so much, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely taken by surprise by some of the wheel. Wow, a really late blacksmith here, or black belt here. It seems like a pretty comfortable pickup for Zach.
Yeah, did Zach pick up a VS Seeker? I feel like he did at one point. Maybe it's not in the draft.
He saw one, but I don't think he actually got it.
Yeah, I think we took we took the research instead, but it's still a great pickup. It's such a swing in games to have that damage push.
Definitely. The 40 damage, not quite as impactful in this draft as it is in a lot of others, but that kind of makes Black Belt less of a feel-bad card for both sides of the table. Zach did notably get a second tag call here. I think Dragons is probably one of the single best decks to use tag call in, so I'm sure he's really happy about that.
Yep, another great pickup. I think Baby Search is good enough to play, so I'm probably drafting that right now as well.
Yeah.
It seems certainly more than reasonable in this slower format, like we said.
Definitely. In decks that don't have a particularly powerful GX attack to use, the Cobalion GX Iron Rule can be nice as a splash, but Zach is not going to be concerned about having any lack of valuable GX attacks.
That is not an issue for Zach right now. We have some big selling point ones, especially if we're getting more tag calls and looking for Guzhalas in the back end of this draft. I think that's going to work out pretty sweet.
Absolutely.
Should we have a look at some other
Explore a little bit.
tabs?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at PG Pichu now. So PG Pichu started in on Psychic. Looks like a lot more Psychic. So kind of picking those up. There is a little bit of diversity in some of these pickups.
I
Maybe
like the Bolton Vikavolt means that they can definitely get a good piece of that Mega Manetric that's still in packs to come. So that's actually going to work out nicely.
yeah, that is absolutely true. And Mega Manectric can be a strong option for Psychic, which generally is not the most acceleration heavy, but it can benefit heavily from acceleration. So that's really nice. I'm going to
It's a
hop
classic weakness
into.
combo as well. Psychic and Lightning cover each other quite nicely.
Yeah, oh, yeah, with the fighting coverage. Very
Yep.
true. Looking at Broken Femurs pool now. A lot of dark Pokemon. Any huge build rounds? They did get the Darkrai EX. I think it was very early in this pack for them, and so that is massive. They also, or they have two Darkrai EX. I thought there was only one in the queue, but I guess I'm wrong. I know
Uh,
the
yeah, it's
Arbok
different
EX.
artwork, I think. So it's the Dark
Okay,
Pulse
okay.
Darkrai as well as Dark Cloak.
I'm
But we're
interested to see how the
into
Arbok EX performs here.
yes, I think that's a strong. Obviously, it is one of those two prize Pokemon, but with Malamar VMAX and Arbok EX, there's certainly ways of destructing your opponents. We're into pack number 4 now, and what was it that was
Indeed, I'm
picked there?
gonna snap back to Zach in just a second here, just kind of checking on the rest of the table. Warriors, interestingly, did pick up some more medals in the last pack, but didn't get a ton of them. And then Sebastian, whose pool I'm really interested in, who has that just slam dunk fire draft, but it looks like he's investing pretty heavily in water now, so could see some exploration in that deck and maybe branching into multiple lanes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe weaving in some. Yeah, maybe again it's hate draft territory in later end of the pack, perhaps. Just protect yourself that little
Mhm.
bit.
Think Zach is being taunted in this pack by one of his favorite cards of all time, up against one of the single strongest cards for his current draft. That being the Silvally GX being his favorite card, and the Guzmahala that
Yep.
we talked about being incredibly powerful. I think Professor Oak's new theory is a reasonable pickup for him here. Hopefully, maybe wheel the Guzmahala, but I think that's kind of a toss up.
Oh, I really like the Goose Mahala, to be honest with you. And Silvalo GX is favorite because he has that amazing history at the EUIC. I think I actually commentated his final. So, yeah, once again, I'm here watching over Zach and Silvalo. The story continues.
Indeed it does. Indeed it does. I think if he gets the Silvally that draws while on the bench, the
Yeah.
basically the barrel of its time, then he'd be really happy to play that. But gyro unit, he has lots of retreat reducing effects already, and so I don't think he's quite as interested in it this time around.
That Silvalo is just
Although it is
another one of those
notable,
generically good cards. It's acceleration, it's got a GX attack, and it's retreat. So someone else will love that. Oh, wow. ADP's
exactly.
finally here. It's alongside Silvalo, which is probably one of the better draw options he could have thought about.
This is
We got a
pretty brutal for
Snapkick
him, but he does
ADP.
decide that he's got to pick up the ADP here, which is rough.
The problem is the pack is just not good enough to attempt a wheel. There are times where you know that people won't care about this card, but even in a pack like this, you see Com go, you see like MuEX go, Silvally go, Defiance Band maybe, but then it's those like 2 or 3 question mark picks where someone could be like, I don't like ADP, let's get it out of the pool right now. So I feel like this is just a bad situation where you just have to accept that this is not a safe wheel.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I think Zach taking the responsible line here, even if it is not necessarily the most appealing one.
And ADP does have this errata, of course. It only has its ultimate ray attack, and it can only attach to dragon type Pokemon. So we can't use the Ultra Creation GX, and it's exclusive acceleration for dragon types. So it's not really that flexible card that other people might go for, but it's still just mandatory to have for this dragon acceleration, which is really what we've been lacking. We've passed on a lot of abilities and other sort of subpar attacks, and now we have a huge selling point in Ultimate Ray, gets the lads well prepped here alongside those double dragon energy as well. I feel like Zach is not going to have an issue chaining attackers now with this pickup.
Absolutely. This is pretty much the perfect deck for ADP. Zach's basically been in Dragon. I mean, not basically, literally been in Dragon since pick one. And so he
Yes.
has tons and tons of options to take advantage of the ADP's acceleration. Incredible item-based search
Treasure.
here in the mysterious treasure for him. I
Yeah.
can't imagine we see anything else.
Yeah. 2 switches in the same pack is notable, but I don't think Zak's going to worry about that too much. It's an easy pick of the mysterious treasure where we can search out all of our dragon types, of course, but that valuable discard effect is a bonus in many situations for Zak because we still want to be weaving in that Regidrago V-Star at some point. We're not necessarily all in on the Apex Dragon, but it will be an option that he looks for throughout the games as he's like navigating them. So this is just another big pickup
Absolutely.
for him.
Interestingly, I think Ultra Space can be fairly powerful in a deck like his just because he does have the nag and will probably
Yeah.
end up with 2 or 3 of them by the end of the draft, but I don't think it's anywhere close to the Mysterious Treasure.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many Ultra Beasts we have just yet. We have one Psychic Naganadel to work alongside it. I'm not sure how many others we've actually picked up so far. It's not been a huge
Uh,
priority for Zak.
Definitely not. Yeah, he's got the Ultra Necrozma, he's got the Naganadel GX, the other Naganadel GX. So I think a lot of the engine is kind of Naganadel fueling Naganadel, and
Yes.
I think Zach will probably be aiming for that to some extent. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a primary consistency option for him, but it's something that he'll
Yeah.
probably be nice to have.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many others we've seen. I think there's a random couple of like stack attackers possibly out there, maybe like Celesteela we haven't seen yet. I know we passed
Mhm.
Guzzlord very early on in the draft in like round 1 of picks. Maybe there's still some Buzzwole around. I think we saw one of those go. So there aren't a huge amount, so he's going to have to be very selective of when he draws with that Naganadel. But as we said, it's still just a good attacking option in his deck. So I think that's being played anyway.
Definitely, yeah, and something that since seem to be thinking about this pick a little bit, something to talk about that I noticed when we were looking through the other pools is some players have some really focused drafts and they're doing quite well on their types, but a couple
Mm-hmm.
of players here they've kind of split a couple of types, and it seems like they don't really know which direction they quite want to go in, and so that can we'll see, kind of where that leads this draft. I don't think that Zach is going to be at risk because dragons are such a narrow archetype. You're either on
Mm-hmm.
dragons or you're not. But some of these other players at the table who are, either in a type and maybe they let a couple of cards through and somebody else picked the one up, or water is split pretty heavily between a couple of people right now, and it seems like some people are investing in it fairly heavily. And so I'm interested to see how that matures, I guess, as the draft continues.
Yeah, it's a great point. Maybe people are reading into more signs that are to come. Maybe they're thinking there are multi-type strategies here when you can only afford one loss. Committing all to one flavor doesn't feel that safe. Give yourself a chance into any matchup that you hit just because of weakness and resistance and whatnot. What's the best pick out of these? I feel like this is a supporter pick probably for Zach. What do you
I
value
think
here most?
I think Avery is the best pick here, especially because this is a mutant environment.
Mm-hmm.
Avery is a card that we've seen, of course, succeed in standard several times in cases where decks will play basically with their whole bench. But in mutant, you're basically always playing with your whole bench, and so Avery is almost universally a powerful disruptive tool that can get you some ground in a game. Alternatively, Zach is a little bit light on search compared to draw. He has pretty good draw. He is good search, but not a ton of search. So we could see a Trevor pickup here. I think
Yeah.
Perrin, I'm not totally sure how I feel about the card. I haven't had the opportunity to play with it too much. It feels to me like a card that I'd be a little bit happier to play in lower power levels. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, but yeah, I think Avery and Trevor are the two cards that I'd really be looking at for Zach's pool here.
Looks like he's currently leading Trevor, and I think that's down to the amount of ball search he's had to pass up on earlier. So I think that is just more akin to what his deck is looking like rather than what's the stronger pick here. Ooh, some interesting cards here.
Definitely.
Path to the Peak is an option open to him. Scramble Energy, also pretty reasonable for him here. He does have some stage ones which aren't going to act as 2 prize Pokemon, so it will be open for some acceleration as well.
I do think Zach has seen either every Cherish Ball or 3 of the 4 Cherish Balls in the
Yeah,
cube at this point. So
yeah.
he knows that the item based search is limited now. Um, Interesting couple of options here. The Scramble Energy is just an all star, especially in this power level. Um, could go for one of the supporters, could go for a Path to the Peak. I think all of them have their merits, but I really like the Scramble. How about you?
Yeah, I think Scramble works really nicely. Again, that Venom Shot option we've mentioned a couple times opens up so much more, so you can just target some key threats. I think could be pretty handy. That would be the one that sticks out to me right now. There's still some
Yeah,
top-end
definitely.
Stage 2 GXs that you could work with, like Dragonite GX or something like that could work really nicely with this card. So, yeah, I think I'm going to see Zach agree here and go for the Scramble.
Yep, I don't think that is too controversial of a pick. I'm gonna hop into Apsy's tab real quick. Apsy is interestingly a player that is not quite working on our stream tab here, so we can't show their pool. But okay, so Apsy is on fighting pretty
Yep.
firmly here. Looks like maybe a secondary typing into grass to take advantage of Orbital VMAX, which is a really nice card, and also a very flexible one for a deck that wants to play on few energy and attachments. And then Adam Carl is pretty firmly into grass with it. Looks like maybe a split between grass and lightning, which I think can work very well. Like you said earlier, kind of classic weakness combos. Grass and lightning certainly one of those. So
Yeah.
we could see a pretty powerful strategy here from that.
Yeah, I really like Adam's position, honestly, where we just know there's still much more lightning down the line. The fact they've got a decent chunk of the big grass suite, which Apsy isn't really touching. He's going for just a line for his orbital, mostly for value. Adam's still mostly open with grass and will pick up more lightning pieces along the way. So I think he's in a pretty good position overall because the combination of acceleration and then having that movement of energy is, again, just flexible. And we keep going back to that as being one of the biggest selling points in a slower, low power cube.
Definitely.
It's another
Although, correct me
Dragon
if I'm
Mag for
wrong,
Zach here.
in Adam Carl's pool, I don't see the Venusaur EX, and I do remember that card being seen in the draft already.
He has got it. I can see it there.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
totally.
it
Oh, yep.
was it
You are
was
totally right.
pack
Okay.
one. Yeah. So he was on big grass early. Yeah,
Yeah,
got
I
the
had to wonder
Decidueye,
if
got
there
the
was a grass
Venusaur.
drafter just because we hadn't seen them on the stream tab, and we haven't seen a ton of grass cards coming back, and so I
Yeah.
thought probably there was a grass drafter out there, and I actually love the grass archetype in this cube. I think it's really fun. So glad to see it featured. Zach picks up the second Dragon Naganadel GX here. I don't think
Yeah.
this is a particularly challenging pick on his side, and certainly one that he's happy to get.
Yeah, what do you think about the Gardevoir EX from Delta Species in this cube? I feel like this is such a powerful selling point if you can weave it into your deck for me.
I think it's tricky. I think it's very challenging to take strong advantage of just because it does have true retreat. So you're going to need to figure out a way to get it out of the active fairly regularly. Um, Evolving also removes that counter. So, if the opponent has a really strong stage one and you shut that off, they can evolve it into a stage two, and then you need to figure out how to do that again. So, I think Gardevoir can be a powerful option, but I think this is definitely one of the environments in Cube where I've seen it be the most balanced. Usually, Gardevoir is in a
Oh
cube and
yeah.
ends up being a huge problem very quickly. So,
Maybe, yeah. I think the evolution point is actually a really big one. Maybe I was overvaluing it there myself. The Rotom V is actually really cool as well. That's a very decent lead mon for probably Apsy. Oh, sorry, probably for Adam Carl. Maybe as another lightning pickup for him. It'd be cool for Zach if he can get superior energy retrieval on the comeback. I feel like that could be pretty handy in his deck.
yeah,
If that could
definitely.
move it
The
back.
Superior would be really nice, both from the energy recovery and the discard angle. This pack seems to be kind of gravy for Zach. He's seeing a lot of cards that he wants to see. He's not having to make a lot of difficult decisions, at least not since that ADP pack. And so,
Yeah. We've had one or
kind of
two
cruising
car
to the point.
crashes, but outside of that, it's been pretty smooth, I think. Yeah, we had the Latias plus Kieran plus all the very good supporter cards, and it was Cherish Nest all in one pack, which was heartbreaking. And we've had a couple other having to give up on Rayquaza GX seemed like a big one, so he valued a Noivern a little bit over it, but it's mostly been fairly smooth, to be honest with you. And I think that is one of the benefits of just the situation that he's fallen into. He committed early, and there was basically no competition. Sometimes you commit early, you can get quite heavily punished if people are also seeing, selling point cards early on in packs, and then you can be in this really awkward position where the draft is telling you that you probably have to pivot. But we haven't really had that for Zach here. Again, possibly helped out that it's a 7-person draft rather than 8, so there's a bit more reasonable chance that you get into one line. And it seems like for the most part, we've had a lot of drafters maining one type and then splashing into a secondary type. And that's probably also helped the cause for Dragon, which wants to just put its head down and keep drafting Dragon.
Agreed on all fronts. And to your point in the beginning, where investing in a archetype early can have quite a bit of risk to it. Zach, pack one, pick one, Reggie Drago V Star. That is, of course, the single biggest build around for the Dragon
Right.
archetype. If another Reggie Drago V Star was opened on the other side of the table, somebody else did the same thing, then Zach could have had a very different draft. Whereas now, if the second Reggie Drago V Star is opened in pack five, then nobody's even going to look at it other than Zach
Yeah.
because it is so specific to that archetype. So Dragon is a little bit safer in that way. Its pieces aren't quite as splashable as we see in a lot of other decks, but it definitely panned out for Zach here. And I will say too, I think if Zach ended up facing looks like we are reverting a pick due to some technical difficulties. No worries there. The I do think that if Zach noticed that those dragons weren't coming back, then it's very possible that he could have ended up on a different deck, especially given
Yeah.
some of the signals that we saw toward the end of those first couple of packs where some decks were just totally open.
And one of the other like generic strengths of Dragon, where you can just draft Dragon, is obviously their weaknesses are typically themselves or fairy Pokemon or none. So not having that headache of, oh, who am I facing in round 1, 2, or 3? How much do I have to respect these other type coverages isn't really a threat for Dragon, and that's one of the like inherent selling points, which basically every other draft around this table is probably having to consider to a small amount. Like, what if I face a pure fire deck when I'm playing grass or whatever? How much can I weave into my list to balance those scales as much as possible?
Yeah, definitely. Since we're reverting a pick, we can take a look around the table a little bit. It looks like Apsy and Adam Carl's tabs are actually working now in the stream tab, so we can jump into Apsy's tab just because we haven't had the opportunity to look at it yet. Um,
Yeah,
so
efficient
the
fighting.
Lycanroc,
Yeah,
yep, the Lycanroc, the Lucario, Buzzroll. Okay, and here's our reversion.
yeah.
Looks like we are on Adam Carl's tab. So jumping back to Zach's tab, just got the Naganadel pick from before.
Yeah, I
And
think Adam was definitely into the lightning grass. We know Warriors was quite happy in their position with metal, I'm pretty sure.
so
Uh,
Warriors is an interesting one, and not gonna do too much hopping around in the draft in the stream tab because I don't want to mess anything up. But so Warriors, we saw early on, metal was kind of wide open, and they were pretty seamlessly moving into that. But as the
yeah.
draft progressed, so in pick one, they picked up three water. In pack one, they picked up three water type Pokemon, and then in pack three, they picked up three more water type Pokemon. So we could see a situation with Warriors that they end up kind of split in that water. Same with Sebastian, who has a very heavy water investment with also an extremely strong fire engine. So having to decide which of those to go into is going to be a real challenge, I think, on the deck building side.
Yeah. For Warriors, water, metal again, cover your weakness of Metagross, so you can have matchups where you're just pivoting between those, and then matchups where the water can take the wheel. Sebastian, maybe like a little less synergy between the two, but seems to just have like a best of both. He capitalized on when fire was open, and he's picked some amazing stuff from water as well. Lots of good spread options. Has that Greninja break, as well as Inteleon VMAX, so clear synergy there within his list. So looks like he's having a great draft.
Yeah, I'm maybe most interested in how his final deck comes together, just
That's the
because
issue.
Delphox Break and Greninja Break are really at odds with each other, and
Yeah,
so
true.
um, I think if you wanted to make those cards work together, it's certainly possible, but I think we're probably going to need to see a really high energy count, like a 15, 16 with a lot of basics to really allow that to work, if that is what Sebastian decides what they want to do.
Yeah, has the pieces, but refining that down to the right 60. And it always feels bad filling out with basic energy, I think, especially when you're drafting like almost 90 cards here. You should have enough supporters, enough item cards, all this other stuff. Certainly plenty of Pokemon, so shouldn't be. It's going to make it difficult to carve out those like 10 spaces when you want to be keeping a number of energy in the deck, but then have plenty in hand and discard to like recycle as well. So that's a balancing act for Sebastian to figure out. as we're back on the
Absolutely.
picks, and we have a Dragonite pickup here. Just another Dragon basic, which I think is relevant, and it has this handy bust-in option as well, where you can move energy straight to this Pokemon and then switch it into the active, again synergizing with some of his earlier picks.
Yeah, the Latias Prism Star again really really lends itself
What a
well
card.
to the Dragonite EX.
Yeah.
I think interestingly, what we'll probably see with this Dragonite EX is play it, bust in, and then actually retreat using Hydreigon to essentially retreat for one, or maybe retreat for free in combination with um, the Moon,
Alter
Alter the
or
Moon.
Sky Arrow, yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of letting that hang out on the bench and then evolve into something scarier, because the nature of the Dragonite being that you have to put it into play and then immediately move the energy, it doesn't really evolve into anything that does anything more threatening than just the 3 for 80 or 120. I don't think Zach's energy line is going to look amazing to use that attack either.
No.
And so, but just putting it into play, pushing it active, getting energy off of a damaged Pokemon onto the Dragonite, and then retreating out into something else does allow Zach to present a major threat that is totally clear of damage again.
It's a clunkier but almost second copy of Scramble, and I think he can navigate that quite nicely. A great ball pickup.
Absolutely.
This really highlights how starved we've been for item search for Zach.
I do think Zach's deck is kind of a case where Great Ball is at its absolute most powerful, just because he's going to have a pretty high Pokemon count. He's
Yeah.
going to have pretty much all of the same type of Pokemon, and so if there is ever a case for Great Ball being the pickup, I think that could have been it.
Yeah, if the shoe fits, there you go. What do you think about Sylveon V here? Is just a Pokemon you could put on the bench early for some end of turn consistency. Doesn't feel like we have too many like great pressure Pokemon in the list. Maybe a couple of cheap attacks we can use for consistency. Yeah, it is going to be the Sylveon consistency pickup here. You can end your
I do
turn
think it's a
picking up
very
an
powerful
item.
card.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
Zach,
don't have many
Zach's deck
items,
is
but we do have
exactly
strong
flush
ones.
with items.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much exactly what you were saying. The having access to the tag call in particular, I think off the
Sure.
Sylveon is going to be a huge advantage.
Yeah, we haven't yet picked up a Guzhala, have we? We passed on that, but there's still opportunities for that
Saw
to
the
come
one and
together.
haven't seen another.
Yeah, but 2 tag call, even just the treasure is a big pickup, I think. The scramble switch, obviously,
Definitely.
but like it may be a bit early for that, but just having that in hand could threaten a lot. So I think that's a nice one to grab now. Maybe even the Great Ball, you never know.
Yeah, if the opening hand already has the treasure in it, Great Ball could certainly be a worthwhile pickup.
That's funny.
The It is notable as well to say that Sylveon V could enable some stage one psychics. Kind of the Naganadel GX that Zach notably has with the Stinger, so that suddenly becomes an
True.
option. The I'm looking through. There aren't a ton of super flexible stage one options that we haven't already seen picked up. Gengar Mimikyu's already been taken. Mewtwo or Mega Mewtwo's already been taken.
Is
Mega
Shadow Rider
Alakazam
still
we've already
open? I
seen.
feel like that would be Shadow Rider is probably one of the last big ones, right? That would be huge
Shadow
if that's
Rider is
still
definitely
running.
one of the big psychic build arounds here. I think PG Pichu is our psychic drafter, and Shadow Rider VMAX is in PG Pichu's pool. So yeah,
There you go. Yeah.
so
Expected, to be honest, but
probably
yeah.
yeah, not much of a surprise, but so yeah, the Sylveon is probably. I mean, for Zach, it is a vehicle into Stinger, which wasn't there before. But it's more there for itself as opposed to potential to expand elsewhere.
We get a nice wheel of Ultra Space, which is pretty handy. We have just started to get a handful, so that seems definitely worth drafting and playing in the list.
Yeah, it's a pretty great card for Zach at this point. He has the basic GX in Ultra Necrozma. He has a couple of stage one um, Ultra Beasts as well. There are no stage two Ultra Beasts, so that's not exactly something he needs to be concerned about. But basically, as compelling a case as can be made for that Ultra Space, I think Zach currently has. And so, I'm pretty sure, especially given how limited his search has been that we've discussed now after these couple of picks, it's looking pretty all right. But given how limited his search has been, I think this Ultra Space is a welcome pickup for him.
Yep, really handy. Enabling a draw engine seems solid. We do have that Perrin come back. I feel like everyone's valued it the same way as you did. It's not that helpful. But
Not so
still, you know,
sure.
it's there. But I mean, I don't think Zach is quite desperate enough to take the Perrin here. I'd be surprised if he felt backed into a corner to actually take that card. Yeah, it's gonna be Tool Jammer instead.
Yeah.
I think one of the only tools he's actually picked up all draft, I think, has really not been into those too much.
I don't know which I don't know which directions the packs are passing. What I'm trying to find out right now is there a chance this Magnezone gets back to Adam Carl? Because I think that is an incredibly powerful card that could end up in the Grass Lightning deck.
the Electro Star early win condition and just extra tutor of the deck. Yeah, that could be a pretty powerful one. We're in an even line of packs, right? So it should be going to the right, I would imagine.
I think so. I don't remember actually. I tried to hop into the other tabs just to see who it said they were passing to, but it was loading for me, and I'm not going to hang out
Oh
there
no,
too
it
long.
should probably actually be going left, I think. So it probably
Okay.
misses Adam now.
All right. So Adam Carl.
If as long
not
as
gonna
pack
see
one
that
goes
card.
right, which
I
I
believe
imagine
so.
it would.
Yeah, I believe pack one
Yeah.
goes right in the drafter here.
Yeah, I can confirm that just by jumping into a tab as we pass over. But I think it's probably going to be missed by Adam. Yeah, that pack's now with Sebastian, so it's going the wrong way for him. Decent opportunity for Skylar, perhaps. I feel like nothing else is that strong for you here.
Yeah, Skyla might end up in the deck. It might not. I actually do like the Verizian pickup a lot.
Okay.
So conditions can be a serious element in this draft. Grass has a way, or several ways to afflict some pretty seriously detrimental conditions. Lightning as well can paralyze with a couple of its Pokemon. And so Zach essentially saying, well, I know I'm already playing Grass Energy and I have great energy mobility through a couple of cards. And so, though granted, the cards that give him energy mobility also allow him to switch out of the active. So maybe that's not as much of a factor. But the Verizian going to have lots of opportunities to shore up some matchups. You know, it's one of those cards might not end up in the deck, but it's a good option to have.
Yeah, there's like Celosaur, Mega Venusaur, Mega Beedrill, a couple other pieces.
Mhm.
I'm very happy to see a Rotom V come back.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
see a
pretty
reason.
nuts.
I don't see a world where you don't take that. There's still Mega Manetrix out there as well. Like Zach's not to know that, but that's another big selling point. It's gonna be the lucky helmet over the Rotom V. Sad.
I think for Zach's purposes, that's actually fine because he already has
Yeah,
the Squawk ability. He already has the
true.
Sylveon. You know, it's not as though Rotom V gives him advantages that he doesn't already have in some other form. I am really surprised not to see Adam Carl pick it up, though. I'm really surprised. I wonder what was up against that pick.
He passed on a couple of strong
I'm
lightning
sure, you
cards
know,
there.
yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure there were difficult choices up against the Rotom, but could be that maybe people aren't thinking about it as the powerful consistency piece that it can be as well. Because I know before you said something about it, I wasn't like, "Oh man, Rotom V sounds amazing," but as soon as you said it, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're totally right."
You have to like low power is low power. You got to retrain your thinking. Like getting
Yeah.
9+ cards when half the supporter effects are effectively draw threes equivalent. So yeah, I loved that Rotom. It was one of the first standout basics that I saw in this cube, and I was like, wow, this is amazing strength. But yeah, it looks like Adam wasn't that fussed by a lot of these lightning pieces.
Yeah,
Let's
I
not
think
forget
maybe
he's mostly grass. Don't forget, and the lightning's more speculative. So maybe that's kind of the thinking here.
Yeah, that's very true. Maybe Adam is just kind of deciding to divest from the Lightning, or maybe even he wasn't that interested in it to begin with. Maybe he's just looking for like a single Manectric or something, because it looks like Pack One Pick One for him was Dedenne GX, which is a totally
Yeah,
reasonable Pack One Pick One.
yeah,
But maybe not something that he's interested in pursuing very far, especially because the grass draft is going so well. But this
yeah.
pack is pretty cool.
Yeah, some decent supporter choices. There's another great ball which we've been hyping up for some reason. There's an ordinary Rod, and like you said, 3 copies of Rod is okay. Even Piers isn't terrible. Access to, like, we've passed on Guzhala already. Even Piers just for double dragon isn't the worst thing I could think of. It's going to be a safe Cynthia,
Yeah.
which I can never really question. But some interesting pieces if you delve deep into it. And someone's getting a Solgaleo, which is also going to be huge.
Yeah, I think there's a solid chance this ends up in Warriors pool, even though in this case Warriors is actually on the other side of the table.
He's on
But
the wrong,
I don't
yeah.
think there's a ton of competition. It is a good card in many decks here, but
Yeah, it really feels like a lot of people have just stayed in one lane and stuck to that lane. I don't
yeah,
even think. I think he's getting that clear runway actually for the Warriors. Should be able to get that Solgaleo. I think it's only PG Pichu which has a stage 1 and a basic metal in their draft before it gets to him. So I think he's got a good shot of getting that Solgaleo.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's a solid chance, and also the card quality in this pack is pretty high, and so
Yeah.
pretty solid chance I would say that the Solgaleo ends up in Warriors pool, and I think that he will be very happy about that.
Ooh, wow. Big pack here. We have
Wow, this
Zoroark
pack is
GX.
nutty.
We have finally starting to see some Mega Manetrics. We have Scramble. Iron Hands isn't great for this deck, but is obviously a powerful card. Yeah, how do you value? Has Zach even picked up any speculative dark Pokemon? He has no basic darks. But it is the best draw in the cube, and I think that's not a hot take. I think that's just objectively correct. I think it's only Pidgeot EX, which is the stronger card.
Right. Yeah, Zoroark GX is certainly a very powerful draw option. Given that there are still pretty much 2 packs left, minus a couple of picks, I think it's pretty likely that Zach can find a Dark Basic or 2 to round it out. I think another interesting pick that Zach could have considered here is the Miriam, just to give one last recovery card. Maybe Zach doesn't prioritize that 3rd recovery card. It's definitely something that I kind of came around on after I had played the cube several times already.
Ooh,
and so
we're thinking again. It could be in the considerations here.
We shall see.
I think it's like I think here it's between Zoro, Scramble, and Miriam. Probably is what Zach's thinking through right now. Maybe it was Zach thinking that I don't have a Dark Basic. Let's just double check that that's on the checklist. And eventually does go back to it. I feel like it's so hard to pass up a Zoroark GX, but interestingly, in his first pack of this 5th round here, it could have also been an ordinary rod just for safety and went for Cynthia instead, which I think in that pack it was a harder choice. Whoa, second Zoroark comes immediately to him.
I think
we got a broken deck now.
This has to be a sign. This has to be a sign,
You slap second Zoroark, I think.
You gotta. I mean, if you're invested in the first one, then just go all in. Make this Zoroark Dragons.
There are 4 Zoroark GX in the cube, and they have to be prioritized so highly. Zach's already passed on 1 Silvally with that disc reload draw power. We have Naganadel already in the deck, but the Zoroark synergizes so much more smoothly in the list. It's a cheap attacker, so if we don't have our acceleration online, that could be huge early on. But just the fact that you can cherry pick what you're discarding as you go, and just seeing so many more cards than your opponent is crazy. Zoroark does it all, and it's a 1 prizer in this draft. Righteous Beating is great damage as well. Like, this card is just objectively far above everything else in the draft. So getting 2 of the 4 between 7 people is just nuts.
He doesn't have the advantage of double colorless energy, which is such a powerful enabler for Zoroark's attack. I think we could see a Riotous Beating. I think a lot of the time we're going to see the energies go to the Dragon type Pokemon, but having the option to fall back on it as an attacker, and then of course the trade being so powerful, and being in a deck that is so appreciative of the discard synergy, both now so for the Drago, of course, but also for that Latios that can now accelerate out of the discard, and the Latios GX that can accelerate out of the discard. So, I mean, these last 2 picks have just opened up a totally new world for this deck.
Yeah, I really think Zach's draft was going smooth, but not like the best deck I've ever seen. And now we're seeing double Zoro, and as long as we find those basics, that could be a completely different situation. Even has Scramble in the deck for Trickster GX, which can also just put your opponent in such weird positions at times in terms of how they navigate their prizes. So that's also just absolutely wild. I know we've already mentioned there's some good GX attacks, but man.
There's a solid chance that Zach plays at least 1 Dark Energy as well to use off of Viridian, and and the Alter the Moon has synergy with the Dark Energy. There is an Aurora Energy in the deck. He could end up with a hole in Pokemon. I know he's passed a couple at this point, so not super likely. I think there might be 1 left, but the possibility is certainly there.
I want to greed an Iono here, but Zach's playing safe. I really want to have a Hand Disrupt. I think that's one of the only things we're lacking, right? What Hand Disrupt have we got yet?
He does not have one. Yeah, that is
I would value Iono so highly here. It's unfortunate that it's in a pack with Judge as well, so that's just 1 less opportunity for you down the line to pick up a Hand Disrupt. Let's not undersell Double Dragon. It's crazy in his deck. I'd love to greed an Iono though.
Yeah, I think Double Dragon is the single most important card for the Dragon archetype, maybe even over the
Right.
Dragos. So I understand where Zach is coming from on this pick. Really cannot afford to miss that card, but it is very rough in a deck that has no hand disruption to have to make this kind of a decision. Also, notably up against the Holin's Electrode, which would be a fantastic card for this
Yeah.
deck. This is the third Holin's Pokemon that we talked about a little bit. I don't think there is a Magneton. There is. There's one. Okay, so there
Yeah.
might
We've
be
also
one
passed
more.
that. We've passed
Oh,
Tom. We've
already passed
passed
that.
one Electrode. Have we
Cast.
seen both Electrode now? Is this the second
I
one
think
you've
we passed
seen?
Electrode, Cast Form, and then I don't remember the Magneton, but I take your word for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
So that would be 3
the
of the
I
4
think it's the last one.
guaranteed. Yeah, this could easily be the last one. Yeah.
Um,
Man, look. I'd love to greed
it's rough.
this Iono though.
I
Maybe I'm
think it's
just
a
too like
reasonable.
it's a shame because the pack isn't that strong. So like again, there's that speculation. Like Iono goes, Judge goes, and then it's a question mark. Like Electrode goes, and then you're in that sort of realm of maybe someone values Bull Guy because of their draft. Some people may not, and then maybe the dragon just fizzles, and that would be terrifying for you.
Yeah, that would be I would say almost a disaster of a situation to end up in. The deck will still work, but losing out on the second Double Dragon would be a huge hit to what could be an extremely powerful deck. I do think that. So really, the thinking with playing no hand disruption especially in a deck like this is kind of just saying I think that what I'm doing is going to be better than what my opponent is doing,
Yeah.
and so I'm just hand disruption would be nice, but I'm just not going to worry as much about it. I'm going to focus on making my strategy as strong as possible. Seems kind of the approach that Zach is taking in this situation. It is possible that he could end up with a hand disruption card, but definitely less likely than it was before we saw those in the same pack.
We have another headache here. We start to see a Dark Basic in Darkrai EX. There's a couple Dragon Pokemon. There's even the Stormy Mountains to think about. The Surprise Time Machine, which we've already mentioned, is just a generically strong card. How much of a pansy do you want to be just to secure this Zoroark? Because I think the first question Zach has to ask.
I think this is a pretty brutal pick, and I don't think Zach has too much choice. I think the Darkrai is really important. The Dragonite does not offer a ton of options in terms of damage that he doesn't already have, although the HP
Sure.
is really nice. I think the Salamence is less of a priority given that the Hydreigon is already in the deck, and so Stormy Mountain is, of course, one of the best possible stadiums for Dragon. I think Zach probably wheels the Stormy Mountain and one of the dragons, and
Yep.
so the pick comes down to kind of the Darkrai EX or potentially the Time Machine. But given that Zach picked up 2 Zoroarks here, I think he's pretty committed at this point to making that
Yep.
work.
I want to play 2 Zoroarks, and even a third Dark Basic isn't bad because just seeing more is good. So I'd love to see a Darkrai EX here as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably not what he wants to do, but it might be one of the situations with similar to last pack where it's maybe what he has to.
I'm pretty sure. Have we got a Radiant Pokemon in Zach's deck either? Is there ever a world where Alakazam comes back to you? Probably not in this pack. I would never value it above the Zoro, but yeah, it's just gonna be the Darkrai safe pick here.
Yeah, I think he probably thought about it for a long time, but decided that was the safest.
Ooh, another Naganadel
Altaria EX and
GX.
Nag.
There's Special Charge as well, which you might have to consider.
Oh, he just slams it immediately.
Yeah,
Doesn't
slam Special Charge. Let's just keep attaching
he'll...
double turbos. Double dragons, I should say.
Oh, it's deselected. Maybe he realizes that there are 2 powerful dragons in the pack. Yeah, so Altaria is healing every turn. Light Pulse is a very nice attack as well. And so of course, the third Dragon Naganadel, very nice for consistency for draw engine purposes. But he seems to be getting that from other sources now, so I think that's a little bit less important. And so I do like the special charge here, just because games in this cube can run so long, and like Double Dragon, he has 2 Double Dragons. Like that's tremendously powerful.
And Scramble too. Even Scramble is just a big selling point. So
yeah, definitely.
I agree. With Naganadel becoming less valuable, I think that's an easier pass. The Altaria is a question in itself. If you're in Disneyland, you're getting a Brock's Grit back here as well. That would be amazing for you, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
it is certainly possible, and it would be really nice. The Altaria wheel, I think, is one of the least likely dragon wheels, just because
yeah,
it is one of the easiest and best effects to splash.
yeah.
But it is certainly possible that it comes back.
Naga Wheel is realistic, I think, at least. So that's something.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ooh, nice. A Dark Basic. It's a shame it's up against Guzhala, which again we want in the deck. But I think you just take the Yveltal GX. We saw the high priority on Zoroark the Darkrai EX earlier, so I think Yveltal is just the easy pick here. Ooh, it
Yeah,
is going to be the Guzhala. Here we go.
I think that's reasonable. You know, if there is any card in the draft that I would take for Zach's pool above a Dark Basic, it's probably Guz Mahala. Just with double tag call with the
Yeah.
Sylveon V, it's like, you know, even if okay, you know, I end up in a 1/1 Zoroark, it's good. It's not as good as 2/2 would have been, but having access to the Guz Hala, I think, is going to smooth out those draws so much more effectively than if he was missing it. I am
Yeah.
really interested what this pack looked like when Warriors had it, because the Solgaleo GX is still in here, and we know that Zach is getting this from Warriors. So could be that Warriors is, you know, just kind of big brain trying to wheel it, and maybe it works out. But I think it is probably the single most powerful metal card in the cube.
Yeah. If he gets double Solgaleo and double Metagross, he's really popping off. So that would be fantastic. But yeah, the Guzhala, we've mentioned this for so long, and it's finally made its way into the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge pickup for Zach, even at the potential cost of the second Zoroark. But he's got a little bit of time. You know, I don't think anybody in the draft has necessarily been keeping tabs on exactly how many of each type of basic there are left. Looking at Warriors tab. Warriors. I don't know if he hasn't seen the Solgaleo EX yet, or uh, no. I think either somebody else picked up that Solgaleo EX before it made it to Warriors, or he passed it. Trying to trying to find it now. Looking through everybody's different pool. There's some metal stuff going on there. Nothing too crazy. Oh, here it is. It's in Adam Carl's pool. Adam Carl's just probably, I guess, at this point, just going to go jam grass and then probably try and slot in that Solgaleo GX both as a weakness eliminator and as another way to get energy in play that can then be energy trans with Venusaur.
Well, Lurantis plus Solgaleo was also a deck at one point. It didn't live long, but it was an option. So
That is, I didn't even remember that. But
it was a fever dream of a deck, I'll tell you that for sure.
oh
It was
god.
before Bulu came out, I'm pretty sure. So it was a small window of opportunity, but it was there.
I don't think that Rayquaza EX does anything too crazy for Zach. He's got a great basic count already on the Dragon side. I actually
Yeah.
like the Warp Energy pickup here just because the special charge is already in the deck, and so it can give that another target and just make the deck a little bit more mobile.
I think this is a hate
Goes for
draft
the
pick for
Silvally.
me. Yeah, I think this is just take away stuff from other people. I think the debate here was what was stronger out of Manectric and Silvally, and with so many lightning Pokemon wheeling, I think you just pick the generic. This is probably blocking someone from a strong card.
I interestingly think that the most so Valley GX, of course, very powerful hate draft here, or yeah, very powerful hate draft here. No disagreement at all. The Lunala GX, I think, is
Uh-huh.
potentially the best hate draft pick just because it's pretty clear that Psychic does have a drafter, but that is a
True.
hugely powerful piece for the deck. And so, if you wanted to be really sure that you would hit somebody where it hurt, then the Lunala GX would be a pretty mean pickup.
That's also fair. Maybe punish the psychic player for trying to wheel a strong card.
Yeah, I don't remember what was in that pack either. It might have been, you know, up against something really important, either another strong psychic Pokemon or consistency
Mhm.
or something to that effect.
There is a colorless attacking option here. There's Yell Cheer, which is one of the weaker Pokemon recovery cards, but can get some important supporter cards back as well, of course. I feel like I'd be looking towards, well, possibly even Switch as well. Switch is just a good effect. Yeah, the Switch
Yeah,
is
I think
what
Switch
Zach's
is
leaning towards.
solid. I don't think any
You
of
can't.
these cards are particularly likely to end up in the deck other than Switch. Friend Ball can be good if your deck plays quite a few types, but Zak's is going to be the opposite of a situation. Zak has leaned into
Yeah.
the Great Ball synergy as opposed to the Friend Ball synergy.
So true. Yeah, the
So,
Switch.
yeah,
I feel like Switch is one of the most underrated, like the most frequently underrated cards in Cube because it's not a flashy card, but this card has been in standard deck lists since inception and is basically always important. And even in slower drafts with Switch synergy, just having more of that option is still just like you can't undersell how powerful this effect is in the TCG. It's simple, but it's still so effective.
absolutely.
Ooh, is
And we
this?
can actually see
Ooh.
that Zak is refining his pool a little bit as he goes, at least on the Pokemon side.
Yeah.
He's cut the Pidgeotto, he's cut the Rocket Scizor, cut the Latias EX Delta, the Reshizard, Lapras V, Magikarp, Wailord, but he has kept the Keldeo EX selected.
Mm.
So decent chance that ends up in his deck still.
Yeah, maybe it's one of those where he's only deselecting the definitely nots and not the maybes right now. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. With
Yeah,
the
right
Tool
now,
Jammer in his deck, doesn't need Tool Scrapper, so can just take another dragon here, even if he thinks it's a surplus. I think that's reasonable.
definitely. Right now, without any basic energy, Zach is at 64 cards in deck. Given that the pool does contain 5 special energy, I don't think that's too bad. I think that's actually a pretty solid count to be at right now. But, always possible that it gets more difficult, like it will after he selects a card in this pack.
This really is going to be a tough pick because I think the Stormy Mountains is just generically strong, and then you've got the question of do I want the flexibility of a Dragonite option? Again, you said it's like a replaceable effect in many ways. The Salamence may be a bit more interesting. It then gives you the opportunity to evolve out of Hydreigon earlier, and then you go into the Salamence instead. Although you do have some 2 prize Pokemon kind of at the helm for you with ADP and with Regidrago, that is the Salamence GX effect even that helpful for you. I feel
Yeah,
I feel Stormy is the best here as well.
I agree. I think that both of the dragons that were there are good, but nothing that Zach doesn't have already. And so the Stormy Mountain just being a absolutely top tier stadium for him is fantastic. Wow, that is a late Dawn Wings.
Goodbye Keldeo, hello Dawnwings. That's pretty perfect. We can have great synergy in the deck with this one instead, with the stadiums we've already selected. So that just seems like a big win. And
Yeah,
possible even
just a
attacking threat with
straight
Psych Energy
upgrade.
in the list. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great. Means you don't need the Virizion in your deck either now, because this can also act as that status condition fixer for you. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. Given some of these later pickups we've seen, especially out of the psychic line, I have to imagine PG Pichu is having a rough pack. I imagine some of these picks have been really challenging.
They're either content with just the raw amount of psychic stuff they have in the deck, or yeah, they're lacking certain pieces that aren't the Pokemon right now, and they're just having to scramble for the missing pieces that needs to force its way in the deck in some way or another.
Yeah, Alolan Exeggutor GX can be a very funny option for a deck like Zax's. I don't know if it's a very strong one, but notably, Zach doesn't have any Gust, and so it could be a way to pick off knockouts after the opponent has retreated. And so there's probably merit to it ending up in the final build just for that reason.
Yeah, that's actually true, and we have picked up some grass basics. Oh, sorry, this is the dragon one. Yeah, so
It's a dragon,
that's
yeah.
reasonable.
So
Yeah, and then we're ending on a Raichu. So we're getting into our final pack here, and it feels like there's still a couple pieces for Zach. I think we'd love to see another Regidrago V-Star, obviously, just to add more consistency to the deck. We're still looking for a Dark Basic. This is a nice opener, though. You pick up the second Guzhala, which I think is pretty huge. Roxanne, because we
very
haven't got
nice.
Hand Disruption yet. I think that's also a big consideration card. It's something we're
I'm
lacking
looking
rather than
around.
something that's amazing. Yeah.
I'm looking around quickly at the hate draft status, and it looks like people generally did not get what they were trying to wheel this pack. There are a lot of off-color build-arounds in people's pools right now.
That's going to happen when we have this many picks. It's inevitable that people are thinking they're at 50 or so cards with energy, or like 55 cards with energy already, and they think with a final pack they can get to that 60 comfortably. That it doesn't surprise me that this is the territory where hate drafting becomes a bigger factor than flexibility or these other things to think about.
Definitely, yeah. And you were discussing this already. I think this is kind of a rough pack for Zach as well. Goose Hala, Roxanne, and Evo Soda all bring his deck some extremely powerful things.
Yeah.
Ultimately, decides on the Goose Hala, which I think is fine. But I
Again, it's
maybe
making
would
his
like to see the Roxanne.
it makes his strategy stronger. It makes him go ahead more. But the Roxanne is going to give you those what if comeback situations. But there are still there's
Definitely,
4 admin, there's 4N, there's 2 Iono. I think we've seen Ionos, but obviously these are very rarely wheeling, so it's hard to get a
yeah.
grasp on what's still available.
Hard to know exactly what the status of those cards are, just because there are so many that are going to enter the draft that you never see.
Yeah. You always have to assume that you get one or none from my experience, and Zach seems to be more comfortable on forcing his strategy right now with the second Guzhala, which has insane synergy with the stadium variety he's got, and obviously those special energy. I feel like this is just a huge pickup for his deck, and now he just has an absolute insane surplus of discard synergy as well for his opening turns, so he is going to be cruising right now. I think
Absolutely,
that's one of the
yeah.
only
Those
things lacking for him.
those tag teams hitting the discard are going to be really nice just to have access to those attacks. Interestingly, we haven't seen the second Drago in this draft.
No,
We
it's still out
I
there.
haven't seen it anywhere.
I'm pretty sure it's still out there, which could be
Yeah,
huge.
that would be
Ooh,
a big pickup for Zach. Oh man, he loves Cessation Crystal. We'll see if he can resist.
Cess, I think you got to think it's up against research only, essentially, here. There's
Or
2
Time
Time Machine
Machine,
in the
I think,
pack.
is another pickup that could
Yeah.
work out well here. But yeah, I think it's definitely Research Time Machine or Cessation Crystal. I do think Cessation Crystal has an additional layer of value because Zach is investing so heavily in Guzmahala, and he doesn't
With
have
double
any tools at
tackle,
all right
yeah,
now.
with double tackle, double Guzhala, he can force a Cess very early.
I do think, though,
It
it's
is
probably a
tempting.
pretty easy wheel for him.
Yeah, it's going to be research for now. So we know there's someone around the table playing paths, at least. Maybe
Oh,
they've been
you're
picked
right.
up by
You're
multiple
right.
people. So maybe you think because of the path priority that Cess is less of a grief for people, but also it is way more readable than research as well.
Yeah, I think in this draft specifically, I don't see people value it quite so high. Like I've seen a lot of ability disruption kind of go around. I think part of that is because so many decks are reliant on abilities.
Yeah.
But in a case like Zach's, where he can just kind of force the cess whenever he wants it, and he doesn't have to really suffer the consequences to any significant extent. I think that's a relevant consideration for him.
And we've got
The
for the checklist for me now. Like if you get any piece of hand disruption now, you're happy. Like even a judge at this point, I think would be huge for him. And then it's still the dark basic we're looking for out here. Ooh,
Yeah,
stretcher plus scramble and Hollands. Wow, this is actually a monster
wow.
pack. I was thinking we were pretty much packing things up for Zach, but these are big power spike cards.
Yeah, these are all going to bring something significant to the deck. I'm a little bit lower on Scramble just because I think
Me
Zach already
too.
does have one,
Yeah.
and so the Electrode provides a searchable double rainbow essentially option, and then the Rescue Stretcher is a third super powerful recovery that Zach can include. So both fantastic picks. I did look around a little bit for our Path to the Peak drafter, and it is Broken Femurs. Broken Femurs has
Okay.
2 of them.
There you go.
So the
And
dark
there's
deck
more out
here
there.
is the one playing
Okay,
it.
interesting. Yeah, some I suppose if you're playing this hand disruption, you want to combine it with Path of the Peak so people can't just draw their way out of it via abilities. That does seem to synergize nicely with what they're cooking with.
Definitely, and in the right draw or the right setup, you could maybe get a Ninja Zoro that's kind of hitting for 200 plus damage, drop a Path to the Peak, drop a hand
Yeah,
disruption, and then good luck.
that is certainly a
Same
check
with
point
same with
for
Arbok
some.
EX. Arbok EX is leaning into that.
Its thing, its value just shoots up. So yeah, I think that is actually a very dangerous attacker in the draft. I really like the Electrode here. I think the stretch is tempting, but I think Electrode is just another great mon. You're even making your Great
I
Ball
agree.
stronger. So
It's an option that he doesn't have yet, and there it is. There it is. He
oh.
gets it back. He gets it finally. The second Draco.
Second Drago he must have been. I don't think he was necessarily sweating it out, but I think there's a very real consideration that he had to scratch his head at like, did someone pack one this alongside me and then give up or something like that? But he knows that he was very heavy on Dragon this entire time. So to see that payoff
Yeah,
is huge.
I think at this point, the consideration from Zach was probably something to the effect of either somebody picked it up early and speculated on it, kind of like I did, but they didn't end up in the deck, or somebody had a pack that was a total dud and they took the Drago because it was pretty clear that somebody was taking dragon stuff around the table. But all of those concerns melt away because the Drago is back. It is here.
That's awesome. So you can much more reliably work towards the strategy that we've had from pick one, and it's just a great feeling to see that come together. There were other powerful cards in that pack as well. There was the other Mega Manetric, and there was the Hatterene VMAX as well, which I think is pretty strong in this cube. For this pack,
Absolutely.
Is there a basic
I'd
we can
love to
pick?
see
Yeah,
Ace
we
Trainer.
can.
Oh, wait. Oh no,
There's
Dark
Ace
Basic,
Trainer
you're right.
versus Absol EX as well. That's tough. I think we again just have to respect the Zoroark here. But passing up on another hand disruptor, it was a very low odds that you would see any more, and now it's up against another thing you need. That's a shame. But I think we just have to stick with get ahead, stay ahead strat.
Indeed, it is. I think Absol's a good pickup here, both because the power can always be effective in the right situation, and because Zach needs the Dark Basic otherwise.
That's our 2/2 line secured. The dragon line is filling out really, really nicely. So I think, literally the only thing I think we're lacking is hand disrupt. Everything else seems to, the checklist is pretty much there at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Zach's deck is looking fantastic, or at least his pool is looking fantastic. But I think actually getting to a 60 card deck is going to be very difficult.
Looking like a really. So, what do you think overall of what are the best copies for Zach with this Reggie Drago? We're going to go in early, I imagine, with that card. Is it that we're trying to throw these tag teams away and just use a V-Star Pokemon instead? Are we
I think
going
that's
to
gotta
weave
be
in
it.
the? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the tag teams are kind of the lifeblood of this kind of a deck. The ADP gets a ton of energy in play. The Lottie Lottie can both be damage and fantastic energy acceleration. And then Zach has a couple of these really big damage payoffs. The Ultra Necrozma GX. He actually did end up getting the Rayquaza VMAX back at one point. I did not remember that happening, but it is super relevant in this situation, given that Zach does have so many ways to get energy in play. The nags are fantastic snipe that this deck will certainly take advantage of. So I think that's kind of what he's going to be leaning into here. There might be a basic that I'm missing that has a lot of potential, like one of the white Curums. I don't actually know what those cards do off the top of my head, but they.
I think they're mostly going to be platforms for for evolving. To be honest with you. Oh, this is actually one of the best basics you could find. Guzzlord GX works with your Naga and with Zoroark evolving, but it's up against Compressor, which is tempting. It's up against Backup as well, which is tempting.
I think Zach has enough discard outlets that Compressor is more likely to be an iffy card than not. Maybe he sees it in a different way. Guzzlord is interesting because given the way that Zach might build this deck, it is always possible he could attack with the Guzzlord off of a scramble switch.
That's true.
So there's a lot to consider here. I don't think that there is a pick other than the Guzzlord or the Battle Compressor that he would be considering. Maybe the Roseanne's backup, just because he does have options in pretty much all those categories. But
just going to be
they're both good.
I think.
Yeah,
looking at Compressor. The Guzzlord, it's hilarious how the synergy works so nicely with this deck. You got the Nagdrill and the Zoroark combined to make it like the perfect situation for a for a Guzzlord, which is so crazy to think about. But Compressor is again just if you see Compressor in the first 12 cards, you're so insanely happy with that outcome that I think you take the fact that you can pop off immediately from it. Even though we have so many ways to get these Pokemon to hand, just having another backdoor option is safe. Go on.
Notably, I think this increases the case for Zach playing the Sylveon as well.
Oh, true. Yeah, that's a great shout. Yeah, that was something I wasn't really adding to my calcs. Yeah, that's a good pickup, to be fair.
Yeah, lots of threatening things that can be done with that.
Look at this. More options for Zach. There's another great basic, but there's also Dragonite, which is the more dangerous attacking threat and has huge hit points.
Actually brutal because I guess it's not because Ray is only lightnings and grass, and Zach is going to need to fight way more types than that. So the Dragonite, pretty easy pickup. And probably the last piece to Zach's Dragon lineup, the big 5 energy, 270 discard a few energy attack is the last thing. He has that effect in specific types of energy, but Dragonite being generic allows him to really play from any situation. And I think that this is probably one of the single best Dragon type Pokemon Zach possibly could have seen at this point.
Yeah, that's an awesome pickup for Zach as well. And just the body itself, I feel like this is one that you may not put in the bin too often and actually physically try and get into him and ramp to him, because that body on a one prize is just crazy. Should we jump around and see how everyone else is like rounding out their decks now that it seems like Zach's got those final pieces?
I think the excitement for Zach is pretty much over. So we'll just start.
Those are some wild couple of packs though. The Zorro into Zorro completely changed.
Were.
Like he had to scramble around for some interesting stuff towards the end there.
They absolutely were. It looks like Apsy is kind of in the tank here, but actually decides to pick up this Bayonet. I wonder if Apsy sees a Psychic line.
Maybe scared of Psychic because he's so heavily invested in fighting.
Yeah. I think he's just saying, I'm not interested enough in the Flygon, which I actually do think Flygon is an extremely powerful stage 2 in this cube. Oh wow, a Stark Mountain coming late for Apsy too. That's pretty opportune. But yeah, so Apsy pretty clearly in this fighting deck. What stands out to you in this one?
For his deck, I just think fighting in general is just super consistent. Has he got both Lycanrocs? He's got one of the team up one. Has he got both of the Guardians Rising ones?
3. Is it?
So having
at least 3. He might be missing 1.
Does he have both of the GRIs? If he has, he has both GRIs. So lots of Gust, lots of early aggression. It's pretty atypical of fighting to have this approach. That's kind of how it's been designed in the draft, but it actually makes you a disruptive deck because you're going to be punishing the Zoroarks early. You're going to be punishing the Silvally early. So you're really denying other people their draw. It's really down to see how much draw he has on his side, because he's almost doing like a I don't draw, you don't draw standoff right now, and maybe weaving in this like grass package. I think there's Orbeetle and Decidueye in here, so he's going to try and accrue some value across the game as well a little bit.
Yeah, I think that Apsy, given Apsy's strength of play and the way that the draft looks, I think Apsy is probably one of our most likely day 2 players just looking at the draft right now. The deck is really powerful. He's got a lot of the things that he would have wanted out of that kind of draft, and also a fantastic player on top of it.
Maybe one of the only things hurting him is there isn't a dedicated lightning guy, and you kind of would have expected that to be the case going into the draft. So maybe less like favorable matchups than expected, but the deck itself is still just going to hold its own pretty nicely, I think. That's not too big of an issue for him.
Absolutely. Jumping over to Adam Carl now.
He is ending up on double Manectric, so he can have that acceleration to ramp his grass guys. So I think he's got a very coherent strategy as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think this draft also looks fantastic, and with the 1/1/1, or I think it's a 2/1/1 Solgaleo GX line that he picked the Solgaleo pretty high. It was Pack 5, pick 3 for him. So it seems that he probably intends to use it.
Yeah, even does he have any scramble in his deck? Because you can even just use that as a scramble option, right? And just have a big blow up response attack at some point. And then just use its ability for the majority of the game. That could be an option for him.
I don't see a scramble energy. I'm wondering if there's a Holland's Pokemon, maybe, because I think that would be very powerful in a deck like this.
Yeah, I agree. That could also be a big one for him. It's hard when we're sort of looking at the fly here, but that's a bit of a miss. But it's still useful for its ability.
Yeah, well, I'm notably talking about the Shining Mane one, the one that eliminates weakness and has the colorless attacks. So
I'm sorry,
it slots into the deck really. No, totally good. Slots into the deck just really nicely as it is, and kind of mitigates the risk of investing so heavily into the grass.
Yeah, that's another nice thing to alleviate your headaches, and I think it's mostly about just you're only allowed 1 loss. I know it's only 3 rounds, but just alleviating that. Going into 1 round having a guaranteed loss because you committed down one direction too hard is just too punishing. So it makes sense to cover your bases in that regard. Looks like PG does have mostly Psychic stuff, but also picked pieces from a lot of other lines as well. They didn't just lock into Psychic the entire time. I'm wondering which of these extra Pokemon, how much of it is just fodder. It feels like they sort of gave up on Lightning, really. and how much of it is just going to be like pure psychic for them.
I think what we'll probably see is a psychic colorless deck out of PG Pichu. There are not a lot of pieces from the other types that I think are really worth playing, and PG Pichu does have almost all of the big psychic cards, notably only really missing that Lunala GX.
Yeah.
But a very nice psychic draft at the end of the day. The Pidgeot GX,
Oh
Pidgeot
yeah.
EX, and the Silvally GX as well. So
Yeah.
lots of
Cramorant V
potential.
early. Obviously, this is RSPK turn 1 rules. That's like a crazy strong attack early for you as well. Probably one of the
Absolutely.
strongest available. Yeah, that's a really nice thin colorless package to have.
Yeah, so I think this draft has panned out pretty nicely for them without diving too heavily into like supporter counts and things like that.
Yeah.
All
Going
right,
over to
broken
Broken
femurs.
Femurs, yeah, this is definitely our dark draft, and I think it was pretty clear that with the Path to the Peak disruption, the hand blocking attacks from Arbok, from the VMAX, the Malamar VMAX, has the Umbreon for Gust in here as well. I think they have a clear intention of what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, absolutely. And broken femurs notably was one of broken femurs is the newest player to the group in this event. Came on for just the most recent Cube League, did pretty well, and then ultimately we needed to go down the list of players a little bit to just avoid scheduling conflicts, and so Broken Femurs ended up in the event, and I think that this draft clearly showcases that they understand what needs to go into an effective draft of this type. They did well in the previous Cube League as well, so I think it's always really exciting to see a player who's new to the group doing well in the events.
Yep, clear intention in mind, noticed what was like powerful in a line, and then led that direction alongside their like synergistic item and stadium pickups as well. So their intent is pretty well known. For Warrior Z, it's still going to be that mostly Metagross deck, I would expect, with that splash of water to come in, giving yourself some more bench control, I would imagine, looking at the Alolan Ninetales, the Greninja GX, these sorts of things, weave it into the deck, even Inteleon VMAX just for more damage output. Are we looking at a mostly high damage Metagross deck here with a bit of type coverage? I think that's where we're at right now.
Absolutely. Notably, Warriors did get the Ultra Road Solgaleo GX
Oh,
back. So
nice.
while he did miss the weakness eliminating one, he already has a game plan to shore up the weakness with the water. And
Yeah.
so the more important of the two came back. And I think that just makes this deck fantastic. I think it is so strong, especially got the Radiant Greninja to get the energy in the discard
Yeah.
and draw. Just so many powerful synergies, powerful effects. Looks like maybe he's gearing up to play Iron Hands EX as well.
Why not?
So
You got
yeah,
acceleration.
absolutely. So
It's got
yeah, I
both
think this
Silvally in
is.
here too. Yeah, this is going to be
Oh wow,
Pokemon heavy, but feels like we'll be playing that sort of best of attackers, and seems to have picked up the right pieces for all of them.
absolutely. I think this is going to be a really interesting deck to watch. And then Sebastian. Sebastian ended up in this kind of combo water fire strategy, which I think is going to be really challenging to build, just because we talked about
Yeah.
earlier in the draft how those are kind of at odds with each other sometimes. But if he can pull it off, I think the potential upside is fantastic. It's really really powerful.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you like 50 of the. For some of these other drafters, I could tell you 50 of the cards that go immediately into their deck. I think this is going to be Sebastian in the tank, thinking about what those final cuts and consideration cards are going to be, because there's undoubtedly powerful elements here, but it doesn't have like the most coherent synergy. It's like knowing when to capitalize on your right Pokemon at the right time. I still think there's some insane selling point cards. The Inteleon VMAX, the Greninja Break, are just incredible no matter what you're attacking with. The fire may just be falling off a little bit, and you just weave in pieces. Again, that acceleration from Delphox.
Interestingly, it looks like he kind of leaned into the fire stuff a little bit more
Yeah.
later into the draft as well. So kind of kept both of those threads alive. So I think Sebastian is probably the player at the table who's going to have the tallest task actually going from a draft pool to a deck.
I think it was pretty clear that the draft told him that, though. We saw how much fire was passing on the first couple of packs, especially the Delphox, right? You see Delphox wheel like once and a half almost for Sebastian, so he got that super late. He got that as a pick 13. That's not a pick 13 card whatsoever. So he had that indication that fire was open. So I feel like the draft told him to go fire, then kind of like didn't at a point, and they were just dispersed in weird situations. So he didn't necessarily have an easier time with the fire, but still picked up like plenty of it. So I think he's had not necessarily the worst draft, but the most challenging draft by the looks of things, where other people had smoother sailing. Like I know Zach had a lot of things come in those final 2 packs, but we knew where he was at and he was pretty content with the situation. I think Sebastian will be scratching his head coming out of that draft being like, who was taking what? Because I don't from left to right, people were picking not necessarily a ton of fire, but like just enough because of how open it was at the start. And that almost allows everyone else to have small speculations here and there, and that almost becomes a challenge for you in its own right.
I think Sebastian probably had the most confusing draft, at least in terms of
Yeah.
the signals that he was receiving and the cards that he was interested in. So, but we'll see, you know, how he can convert that into a deck. A lot of powerful pieces available. Um, but I personally would not want to have to figure out how to make them all go together. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's. I feel like Sebastian is probably the last to submit the list because it's going to be the most difficult build for sure. Um, but yeah, I think we are going to give our players some time to get into that building process before we get into some battles. We have 3 rounds today, and players who get 2 victories within our 3 rounds will be progressing to day 2, where Sleight we have a different cube as well. It's the coin flip cube. Do you just want to give a taster of what tomorrow's cube is going to be?
Absolutely. So this cube is ostensibly a high power or ultra high power cube that ultimately ends up feeling like a mid to low power cube. Coin flip is the total opposite. It uses a bunch of low power cards, and because of the modification of the coin flip rule, it ends up ripping fast, super high synergy, lots of incredibly powerful trainer cards that get people to their strategies as quickly as possible. And so determining what the absolute best thing that you can possibly be doing is pinnacle of importance to that cube. So coin flip, really fast, really exciting. Also very skill intensive because you have a lot of options at any given time, and the draft is also very challenging, similar to this cube. So not really giving our drafters any easy outs on either day this weekend.
Everything you learned from day 1, forget it for day 2 is essentially what it's.
It really is. Absolutely. Yeah. These cubes, I don't know if there are many more different cubes that you could put up against each other than those two.
That's amazing. So it's going to put these drafters to the test no matter what. So that's amazing. We are going to give our drafters some time though to get these decks built before we get into that action. So we are going to be back at 12:15 CST for the stream. We'll take a little break and then we'll be getting into some gameplay, which is going to be quite surprising and quite jarring for some people who have just seen that draft because it's going to be slow and tactical despite these massive VMAX, V-Star, Stage 2s and whatnot going into it. So I think this is going to be a real interesting couple of rounds that we have throughout the day.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be great to watch.